And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, fuck him.
Attention to roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern Time, and of course, 5:05 on the Pacific Coast. Bright and early. Grab your coffee and donuts. Here we go. Great topic for you today. NYPD quotas versus performance goals. Shout out to our executive perspective. Rob Lukash and Ron Layson did a great job on Wednesday night, giving you their perspective from an executive standpoint. So today, before we segue into that topic, we're going to talk about, of course, Black History Month. Let's talk about some news going on in New York City, nationwide. So let's get right into it. Black History Month. We have the first of many. And with the finest Unfiltered, we have the first black man to be terminated without cause and to be terminated without due process. Let's get into it. John, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I think it's a historic event. This is another achievement under the Eric Adams administration. We have the first black NYPD officer, first actual immigrant as well, too. First generation immigrant to be fired without ever receiving a department charge, without ever receiving department charges and specs, without being charged criminally, without receiving a department trial. And he was terminated within 7 days without seeing due process. And yet I hear about all the black leaders celebrating Black History Month, and yet they're talking about how removal of Eric Adams would be an undermining of black leaders in politics. But yet nobody's talking about what happened to Marlon Bethel. So I guess the only thing I could tell is that black leaders and people that are celebrating Black History Month are absolutely full of shit, because they could care less about civil rights. They could care less about workers' rights. They forgot about what happened in 1964. They forgot about Human Rights Act of New York State, and they forgot about Title VII. So, yeah, Marlon, congratulations, brother.
Yeah, thank you, bro. Thank you. I'm a trailblazer over here, you know.
Trailblazer, bro.
Yeah. It's a crazy world we live in, you know. Morning chat. Hope everyone's doing good today. So I made a comment that I said that because, you know, the NYPD's Twitter has been doing a lot of virtue signaling lately. You know, a day ago, the PC was a video was posted up where she was giving a speech, and she noted past historical figures in the department, black figures. You know, like the first black police officer, and she mentioned Ben Ward, and you know, a couple other names. So I mentioned in reply to that tweet that, you know, that there's a lot more discrimination now than actually back then, because back then, at least, nobody was being fired for making a personal choice about their body. You know, we've seemed to have lost that. So yeah, I'm honored to be a trailblazer. You know,
Tiny Kinsella is a trailblazer, and you're a trailblazer now also. She was called a trailblazer on a recent podcast that she did. But you know what? Shout out to you, Marlon. You know, you have been in the face of adversity here. So you get to celebrate Black History Month too. Unfortunately, you've been on the other side as a recipient. So let's get some of the news. You know, listen, the bottom line is I'm sorry that happened to you. It's terrible. But you know what? We need to stand up for Marlon, because Marlon is every cop right now. You at any point, they could pick up and say, you know what? You have to follow some specific mandate or some specific rule or policy. It's arbitrary. It doesn't fall in line with the contract. You know, I heard on a prior podcast we did, people talking about, well, they have to promote people after 18 months because of the contract. So all of a sudden, the NYPD follows policy and follows contracts when it's convenient. Let's get right into this. Black History Month.
Yeah, so you want to know what's hysterical? Before I even go further into this, before I play this video, I have to give a little sidebar. So Winston Faison is the CEO of aviation, right? Black man. rumored that Jessica Tisch won't fly with him or his pilot. She has select pilots that she'll fly with. So we've put him as a point of note in this Black History Month segment from News 12. So like Marlon said that he's a trailblazer. When's he getting his own News 12 segment? When's he getting his little video spout from Jessica Tisch or the next police commissioner about what a trailblazer he was? So let's listen to this. But I want you to keep in mind, it's rumored the police commissioner will not fly with Winston Faison, even though he tried to fly her.
Well, this Black History Month, we're highlighting the history makers in our own New York City Police Department. News 12's Caitlin Ulrich takes us inside the aviation unit to meet the first Black man to lead the unit and the pilots he leads.
There is a lot of pressure when flying. Maybe not for veteran pilot, NYPD Aviation Commanding Officer Winston Faison, who has dreamed of flying since he was 5 years old, living in his East New York home. But he feels the pressure in other ways.
When you're the first of something, you have to make sure you do it right so it doesn't mess up people coming behind you.
Chief Faison is the first Black man to command NYPD Aviation.
The monumental position I'm in, is going to open doors to other kids that's 5 years old in East New York, walking around looking at the helicopters.
And his right-hand man is the first Black man to be the executive officer of aviation.
We didn't think about it, but we actually made history with that.
The history they've made inspires the young pilots.
It definitely passes on motivation to others like myself, in hopes of also being able to reach that potential as well.
Who also dreamed of the sky in their Brooklyn childhood homes.
Born and raised Brooklyn kid down in Flatbush, never thought I'd be flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft, a ton of them. So it's good to be able to see that.
Representation is important to the commander.
Seeds grow in multiples. So there's a lot of kids out there who just don't have an idea or can't even fathom flying. So looking at Hilaire, looking at myself, they see it. If you see it, you can believe it.
Because as these pilots break.
So, all right, enough of that. But what do you think Winston has to say about you, Marlon? I know Winston. I've been on a few jobs with him. But where was Winston in this? I understand the celebration of the month. I understand the significance of it. But I guess we forgot all of those lessons, and we're back to it's okay to discriminate against people now.
Yeah, I mean, if like I've said before, you're doomed to repeat history if you don't correct the mistakes that you've made, and obviously the department never learned and didn't fix those mistakes because we went through 2021 again. I think it just infuriates me watching these videos because what message are you trying to portray here? It's obviously not sincere because here I am right now. And it's not just me, okay? Because there are a lot of other people in my position, and it's not just about the situation, the mandate. This is a larger issue, and it's a larger issue about rights. It's about poor policy and discrimination, and the department needs to address these things before you go virtue signaling and putting an insincere message up there.
Good morning, Rich Raj. Coffee and donuts, $20. Shout out to you. Thank you, Rich Raj. Always putting his hand in his pocket. Says, good morning, everyone. Very cold here in Staten Island. Stay warm, brother. Quota John, it's cold in Florida, too. It's getting all bundled up out in Northeast Florida. But, yeah, stay warm. Marlon, it's interesting we talk about you being a trailblazer. And you absolutely are. And what did he say? What did he say to the commanding officer? He said, if you're going to be the first of something, you have to do it right because there are people that fall behind you. So you know what, Marlon? You did it right. You did it right by asking questions. So people know going forth, we can't just be sheep and we can't just be compliant. We have to be reliant on ourselves and ask questions. It's important to ask questions. It's important to challenge authority in a respectful way. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, saying, hey, what is the science behind something? You want to be comfortable. That is the most important thing, especially when it comes to leadership and having communication with people in an organization. People do not want to be left in the dark. People want to be informed. People want to be in the know. And that's all you wanted to do is you ask questions and want to be in the know. But I tell you what, when I watch that, I see a lot of virtual signaling. And if I was a black man, I would be quite insulted by that because it almost looks like they're parading them around like, ooh, look at this black pilot. Look at this black co-pilot. Look at this other black guy. It's like, hey, how about the fact that why don't we talk about what you did in the course of your life to become a pilot? What did you do? What academics did you have to comb through to get to this point in your life other than being black? Yes, it's great to talk about Black History Month, but I feel like, honestly, it's insulting. If I was these black men, like, oh, look, they're parading me around. They're not talking about my skill set. They're just talking about my color and how somehow I was suited to fit into it. That's where I see the problem.
100%. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, if I may, there was also, like I said before, 2 days ago, the PC gave a speech, and amongst the group were all these fraternal organizations. There was Noble, there was Guardians, there was a lot of these fraternal black organizations. Where are they? You know, where are they? They remain silent on all these issues. You know, and like, but it probably shouldn't surprise us because if we were to get to, if we were to actually, if we were to acknowledge that it's really about skill set and knowledge and a meritocracy, then it's not about who you are, but rather what you do and what you bring to the table. And would these organizations even exist at that point? So.
No, it's a terrible thing, dude. I think, you really sparked it up yesterday with that tweet, and it annoyed the hell out of me, and especially the fact that the PC deleted her video upon you retweeting it. I mean, absolute embarrassment. They should be disgusted with themselves, and you're 100% right. Noble Guardians, they should be disgusted with themselves as well. So for those of you that are on here listening to this, I'll gladly tell you when I see you, because it's absolutely disgusting that you've been absolutely nowhere. And I'm not saying this is a civil rights labor law issue. So with that being said, we're going to do a little bit more news before we get onto the topic of NYPD quotas and performance goals versus performance goals. So I saw this page yesterday. The reporter, Harry, also known as Harry Deceitful Siegel, had tweeted this out. And this is just a glaring view of all of the problems facing New York City in one day. A glaring highlight and complete incompetence in our elected officials. Complete failure. So let's go around first. Governor Hochul's not removing Adams from office, but plans oversight and control guards. I think, honestly, absolutely disgusting. He should have resigned, but he didn't. And I think this goes hand in hand with another headline that's in here in the latest headline, is that Eric Adams has not been being briefed on any potential terrorist threats to New York City for months. And Kathy Hochul knew about it. She knew exactly about it and didn't remove him. If he was unwilling to step down and he was willing to endanger millions of lives in New York City for his own self-gain, for his own political gain, he should have been removed if there was leadership. But there's not. First indicted mayor, 4 police commissioners, numerous forget about the 4 that just left. He had dozens of top officials have left his organization, shrouded in scandal. The mismanagement, the incompetence. Kathy Hochul did nothing to stop any of this. And again, the only time she spoke up is when he said he was going to cooperate with the Trump administration. Eric, what do you think about Kathy Hochul saying she's not going to remove him and Eric Adams being stripped of his security clearance?
You would think that it would be extremely imperative to have a line of communication from the governor of New York State down to local politics, especially New York City, where New York City makes up approximately about half of the entire population of New York State. The most metropolis city in the entire country, the most iconic city in the entire world, the economic apparatus of the entire world. What would it take for Kathy Hochul at this point to actually remove Eric Adams. It's quite interesting at this point to say, well, what is the threshold? What is the criteria? What is the criteria set for Kathy Hochul to actually remove him? I mean, we've had numerous indications why he should not be the mayor of New York City. Even before he was indicted as the first mayor of New York City, it was completely inept, completely inadequate. The amount of nepotism and cronyism, the amount of unscrupulous behavior, the cloud of suspicion with his administration by his appointments. And then we have the first indicted mayor. And then after that, we have him flip-flopping on different issues. We have more unscrupulous behavior. We have a sheriff that's going around doing warrantless searches that completely violates the Constitution under Eric Adams, and she never removes him. That's why I say at this point, what does it take for her to get to the point that, okay, it's time to move him? If she didn't move him now, then there's absolutely no reason to move him. What does he need to do? Does he need to do something so obtuse in the middle of Times Square where everyone sees it, God forbid, and actually commit a crime in public? This is just insane. This is insane that we got to this point in New York State politics. These are the most incompetent people I've ever seen in my entire life. You know, John, you said it the other day. We were talking about it. Anybody could be mayor at this point and show more competence than Eric Adams. Well, the same thing goes for Kathy Hochul as well. You know, I said to myself for years, I never saw myself serving politics, not something that I've wanted to do. But at this point, I said, could I serve the public in that manner? And when I see these appointments, including the appointment of Kaz Daughtry to deputy mayor, I say, wow, this whole time, I could have run for something. I don't have any interest of it, but these are people that are supposed to serve the public, that are supposed to have emotional intelligence and have leadership skills to guide the public. And she's not removing him. She said she was going to meet with leaders and community people and teams and try to determine what would it take. This is an epic fail. This is an epic fail. Again, voter apathy is a huge problem for New York State. We have to get out there and vote. We have to do our research. We have to vote better because this is the byproduct and this is the result.
Well, what do you think about Eric Adams not having a security clearance and Kathy Hochul, regardless of what Eric Adams has done, refusing to remove him because, in my opinion, and Rob Lukash has said it here too, she's afraid of losing the black vote. And she's more worried about her own political gain. Eric Adams refuses to step down. So basically, New York City's wide open at this moment in time for a terrorist attack. And it's completely fine because, hey, Eric Adams still gets to collect the salary, give the crumbs to his friends, and Kathy Hochul still gets to keep the black vote.
Yeah, I don't know how anyone could continue justifying his mayorship, you know? And I say that especially in light of the news from last night that there was two, I believe it's actually 3 buses that exploded in Israel. They were unoccupied at the time, but they believe that like a device was placed on them that detonated. So, you know, New York City also has, outside of Israel, has the largest Jewish population in, you know, certainly in America. So again, I can't understand why anyone could justify this, you know, because New York in particular is constantly a threat for terrorism, you know. And how could you have the chief officer of New York not being privy to that information or being privy to the intelligence related to that information? You know, I've said it before, and I maintain this, that Kathy Hochul doesn't want to remove Eric Adams, and that Eric Adams is a convenient scapegoat, you know. And the reason why I think that even more so now is because within this, there are some she expanded the powers of like the controller and the state's ability to monitor the city's finances, which is very curious because at its surface, it seems completely unrelated to Adams' troubles. But I'll get back to that as we swing around again.
Well, at this point, I'm very disappointed that we haven't seen any immediate action by City Council. Now, it's never been done before, and it's considered rare. but the city council does have the power to make a move now to impeach Eric Adams. That should be done. Impeach Eric Adams, take it to the appellate court, and then have a 2/3 vote and have him removed. Never been done before, but then again, we've never had an indicted mayor for New York City. So with the first mayor indicted, we have a governor unwilling to remove him. Where is the city council at this point to look out for the people of New York City, look out for their districts, and remove Eric Adams? This is absolutely irresponsible. It's completely reckless at this point. We've seen unscrupulous behavior. We've seen shrouded with just completely shrouded with scandal. We have appearance of impropriety. We have corruption probe upon corruption probe. We're not talking about one isolated incident, and we're not making a power play at this point. When are we going to utilize these powers that are in place, whether not been used before or not? But this is the moment in time that has to be, we need immediate action, but the city council has to move forward. There's no doubt about it. I said it months ago that Kathy Hochul would be reluctant to move Eric Adams because of race. And Marlon, you're absolutely right. And Rob Lukash called it here. The bottom line is she doesn't want to get involved in that race issue, and she doesn't want to lose the black vote. It's insane. It's gotten to the point we talk about go along to get along. Go along to get along to keep getting voted. That's what this is about. Not about serving the public. I'm absolutely disgusted. I can't believe what's going on in New York State politics. It's actually shameful.
So I've been getting a lot of pushback. I put, we've been smacking ever since that lawyer's testimony came out. Eric Adams' lawyer, Alex Spiro, who's also Elon Musk's attorney, and a few other high-profile figures. He said when they went in front of Judge Dale Ho to try to get Eric Adams' charges dropped with prejudice. Without prejudice, meaning that the charges could be brought up. He said that this is taking a significant toll on the mayor's ability to do his job. Even though Eric Adams said, no, this ain't no big deal. It ain't no big deal. I'm still able to be the mayor. This guy says the exact opposite. His lawyer's saying the exact opposite. There's no way he could be the mayor while these charges are looming over his head. Even though, and he's saying this is taking up most of his day, which we all knew that he's not focused on, he was focused on going out. Now he's focused on staying out. He's not focused on being the mayor whatsoever. So his lawyer testifies to that, sworn testimony, and then his lawyer testifies to something that we all said from the beginning. There's no way he has a security clearance. We've been saying this for months and months, and we've been called liars over it. We've been spreading misinformation over it. We also said that numerous of his top appointed officials in the NYPD also do not have security clearances. Right? And everyone sat there and said, we're lying. It's not a big deal. The people that need to know. And I'm sitting here and saying, you're telling me that the mayor and at least 2 police commissioners don't have security clearances and they don't need to know? So who's in charge? Who's in charge? And that's my question. That's my question to New York City. That's my question to Eric Adams. This is my question to the police commissioner. Does the mayor of New York City need to be aware of terrorist threats? And the answer, in my opinion, is overwhelmingly yes, because then you're not the mayor. You don't get to make the decisions on what's going to happen. You're the chief executive officer of New York City. How could you not be aware of a threat that could potentially murder and maim millions of lives and disrupt the traffic in your city, disrupt the economy of your city, disrupt the safety of everyone that comes through the city, whether they're a resident, a tourist, a worker? How do you not need to know that? You absolutely need to know that. And for months, Eric Adams has been flying the plane blindfolded with no hands. No one's saying anything. It's like, oh no. And then I get some people, well, I was in counterterrorism, and they could get a brief with redacted information. He's not allowed to know about them. I don't care who gets it. He's not in charge. Would you agree with that statement, Marlon? Can the mayor effectively run the city without being made aware of terrorist threats? Can the police commissioner effectively run the police department without being aware of terrorist threats? Can the chief of the patrol or the chief of department and the deputy commissioner of operations, can they effectively run the police department without being made aware of terrorist threats? Because I say absolutely not.
You can't. You absolutely cannot. So I'll tell you one of the things I did in Intel. So prior to my last unit, I was in a unit called Leads, and Leads, what Leads does is anytime you see something and you say something, you call 911, you call the see something hotline, you notify police that there's something suspicious going on, right? Anytime you do that, that gets Intel gets notified, and they make the decision whether to make it a case. If they make it a case, they send it to Leads, and Leads goes out and maybe they'll talk to people, they'll do some background work. Basically, their job is to see whether this is actually a legitimate threat that needs further scrutiny from other units. But the point is that Leads looks at it and then draws up a report that goes up to the top executives, and the PC and the commissioners are all briefed in the morning. So how can the PC, how can the top officials in the police department and the mayor, right, not have access to intelligence regarding terrorism, especially since, like in the case of Leads, a lot of that information intersects with the Joint Terrorist Task Force, right? So at some point, to get further insight into a case, they may need to pick up the phone and call the JTTF or get briefed by the JTTF chief. So how is that going to work out now exactly? Who's going to make, if you need a decision made that crosses multiple agencies within the city, right? And we need a plan that encompasses the whole of New York, right? Who's going to make that call? Isn't that what the mayor's supposed to do? How can he effectively protect the city of New York if he himself cannot participate in the discussion and in the investigation related to terrorism? It just can't happen. These are things that we're now being made to believe is normal when it's not. Okay, in prior administrations, this would be completely out of line, but now we're supposed to accept that Eric Adams could continue continue being mayor and continue his duties as mayor without having access to that intelligence. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
The mayor not having security clearance is a major impediment to the operations of New York City. There's no doubt about it. I want to thank the chat, by the way. I want to thank the chat. Got some great comments here. Engaged very well in this conversation. I really appreciate it, because this is something that's sensitive to everyone, right? You're concerned about the safety of New York City, especially with the height of awareness, the situational awareness that you have being in New York, or especially when it comes to terrorism. So Drone Ranger says, how can you properly plan for large-scale events like New Year's Eve, Thanksgiving parade, West Indian, etc., without being briefed on terrorist threats? Absolutely. I think you're spot on, Drone Ranger, because just the nomenclature of New York City, the apparatus of New York City is always constantly voluminous, constantly flowing with parades and different functions and different events. And these might not have specific threats at a time, but we always have to be prepared because these are large-scale events. The New Year's Eve event is a large-scale event, probably the largest in the entire world. And at any moment, that could be a targeted threat. So mayor being in a leadership position for the city, in order to have agencies correlate and coordinate with each other, the mayor has to have security clearance. If the mayor does not have the security clearance, then potential communication from the police department to the fire department, along with sanitation, OEM, different organizations that keep this city functioning, that are centric around public safety, that coordinate. That's why we have a deputy mayor of public safety. Isn't that important? Maybe that's why he appointed.
We have a great one now.
What's that?
We have a great one now.
Listen, maybe that's why he appointed Kaz Daughtry, because Kaz Daughtry will actually give him the security clearance, give him the information. But in order to have, honestly, to be centric around public safety, we need to have all these agencies in New York City communicating. Communication breaks barriers, and that's the key to safety and key to success. And without the mayor having security clearance, I find it to be an impediment. And another great comment here. Our brother and executive perspective here, Rob Lukash. Rob Lukash says when he was the executive, when he was the chief of special operations, he had to have clearance. How can he put forward his plan of action without telling the top brass, which is the mayor? You're absolutely right, Rob Lukash. It's very important. The mayor is at the focal point. All the agencies are centered around the mayor. The mayor has to have that information. But this is New York City, and only Eric Adams could flourish and survive in this environment.
Someone's saying that audio keeps coming out, but I'm being also told that if there's a problem on YouTube, if you're listening on YouTube, if you guys could just go over to log in and log back out of it. I don't think it's a problem on our end. I think it's a problem over on YouTube. I could be wrong about that, but that's what a lot of people are saying on here. So just check the chat. Just pop out, pop back in. I don't believe it's us. So Rob Lukash, chief, longtime chief. He says the chief of special operations and himself had clearance and can relay our plan of action if we can't tell the top brass. I get it, but the chief SOD is not the person that needs to know, because not that you don't need to know, you do, but you're not going to be able to effectively make the moves that you need to make without the mayor and the top brass being involved, especially when you have egomaniacs in charge of New York City and in charge of the New York City Police Department. And where politics outweighs public safety, where politics outweighs civil rights, where politics outweighs the law, there's just absolutely no way you're going to be able to. There's just absolutely no way that you're going to be able to effectively get done what needs to be done. You may have to stop transit. You may have to shut down bridges and tunnels. You think that, if something's going on or they got something, that you think the mayor is going to be okay with that happening? Absolutely not. And he doesn't know what's going on. I mean, to me, it's not even a question. If you do not have a security clearance, you should be ultimately removed from your position right off the bat. And that goes for every top ranking member of the NYPD, as well as the mayor, as well as the governor. Cops get sidelined all the time, right? We get sidelined all the time. Can't be in there. Let this investigation play out. And if that's the case, there should be a plan of action in place. And don't cry about Jumaane Williams, because you voted for him. So maybe vote for better. Don't cry about Jumaane Williams coming in, because I don't care. You wanted him, and guess what? And guess what? More than likely, Jumaane Williams doesn't qualify for a security clearance either. So then it's the next in line, and guess who that is? Brad Lander. And guess what? Blame yourselves. You voted for him. So I don't I'm not okay with it. Eric Adams, if Eric Adams cared about people, all of Eric Adams' problems just relate to the fact he only cares about himself and doesn't care about people. If you took a position to lead, if you took a position to fly the plane, because that's what he says that he's doing, he's the pilot, the stewardess in the back, and I'm not trying to diminish the chief of special operations. But in honestly, it's really that far back, dude. It's like you're the stewardess in the back of the plane. You are. I'm all the way up in the front. I'm flying the plane, and he's flying the plane blindfolded with no hands. And he's like, and millions of lives are at risk. The timing it's going to take for you to go around all of these layers and all these people that you have to go out, they're going to throw roadblocks in your way. When seconds count, lives are in danger. And Eric Adams does not care, because it's all about Eric Adams. Kathy Hochul does not care, because it's all about Kathy Hochul. Honestly, not only should Eric Adams be removed, and not only should he resign or be removed, Kathy Hochul should resign immediately. They've endangered millions of lives. How this is not national news and playing on every news all day long, that the mayor doesn't have this, while he's calling for open borders, while he's calling for the entire world to come to New York City. I mean, I don't see it. I don't see how we could sit here and say that everything's okay and everything's functioning. The city's not functioning at all. Just look at the daily news headlines from yesterday. Just look at that. It's absolutely disgusting. Also in that daily news headline from yesterday, obviously, the 6 officers got charged with murder, 4 got charged with manslaughter, 10 officers in total in the state prison death, where they beat a man to death, a handcuffed man to death. So
Robert Brooks.
obviously, no shock there. No shock that was coming there, but another highlight in incompetence in leadership, incompetence in city leadership and state leadership. And then I think the bigger news of it all is DOI. DOI, Department of Investigations, takes 15 months to put out a report on Adams' good friend, his former top aide, Tim Pearson, and basically stated that he shoved 2 security guards. He instigated a fight at a migrant shelter. He walked into a migrant shelter, did not want to ID himself. When he was asked for ID, he started shoving security guards. And then he called the precinct, he called the inspector, he called for an 85, and he had the security guards arrested giving false information. And yet all we got is a 15-month investigation from DOI and a report. What do you think about that, Marlon?
There's a word that we should all a term we should all remember, because it's going to keep coming up a lot, and it's called kakistocracy. Okay, kakistocracy is government controlled by the least suitable or competent citizens of a state. And you're going to see that more and more in New York. You've already seen it. You've already seen the results of that in California with the wildfires. Okay, and you're going to start seeing it more and more in New York. And I say this because the people who pay attention to the news and who aren't low information see what's going on in the state. They see what's going on in the city, and don't think for a second that those people aren't coming to their wits' end and saying, you know what, maybe I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this place. It's time for me to go. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to Tennessee. I'm getting out of here. So what you're going to start seeing, I've said before, is that more competent people are going to start leaving, and it's going to create larger holes in government services, and basically the way the state and the cities run. And you're going to start seeing more public failures like these as time goes on. And it's a byproduct of the best people moving to the places that treat them best. Okay, there's a phrase in economics. It's by an economist named Winston. He said that capital moves to where it's treated best, and capital also includes human capital. Okay, people go where they're treated best. So, we shouldn't be surprised that this is happening, and we should keep an eye out, because it's going to get worse until the state and the city recognizes what's happening and recognize that we've gone over the deep end, and we need to self-correct before we create larger problems.
We see the domino effect right now at New York City, and ultimately up to New York State, as far as just completely decimating life in New York State, the quality of life. New York City, being the epicenter of the entire world, all eyes are on it. Right? It's the economic apparatus of the world. So as we speak here, we're almost 40 minutes into it. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the chat. Everyone's well engaged today. I love the comments. You guys are spot on. We're talking about incompetence right now. Incompetence when it comes to politics at the local level, our mayor, our New York City politics, and all the way up to the states. Simply E, you're absolutely right when you say this. How is the mayor able to say on TV that New York City is the safest, largest city in America when he doesn't even know all the potential threats? That's exactly right. Information has to be disseminated. If we look, I always talk about small unit leadership breakdown. And if we look at the police department, it's important that information goes up the chain and goes back down the chain. The reason why I say it's an impediment when it comes to Mayor Eric Adams, if we have information flowing through different agencies throughout New York City, the fire department, the police department, sanitation, OEM, corrections, and it flows up to the mayor, it has to flow back down. But if that information can't make its way to the mayor and go back down to the troops within these agencies, that's a problem. It's an impediment. That's a breakdown in our level of communication. Ultimately, we have a problem. And that's why we have these checks and balances, and we have these power plays in place where Kathy Hochul could remove Eric Adams, where New York City can enact their ability to impeach Eric Adams. That's why we have these things in place. And I see a lot of grumbling on this chat saying that, well, the byproduct would be Jumaane Williams. But hey, is that how could that be worse than what we have right now? And again, I agree with John. That was voted on by the people. And I see some people in the chat saying, you think that it's people in this chat that voted for Jumaane Williams? We're not saying that. That's why it's important that the overwhelming majority of New Yorkers get out of their houses and actually vote, because this is the byproduct. When you have people that don't belong in particular positions in New York City, and we have failures, and we have to expect that failures could happen, such as with Mayor Eric Adams, or if we had another mayor, well, that there are people that are in place to take these positions. And that's why people always have to be ready for that next level position. We have to have, we have to, as Sal Greco would say, low information people, low information voters, we have to get in the game. Everyone has to get in the game and get educated and acknowledge yourselves and what's going on with politics, because it does affect you on the local level. So with that being said, this is the state of affairs that we're in. We have to do better. We have to vote better. And we have to hold these politicians accountable. They should not be served. They should be serving the public.
So Ron Layson asked, can Kaz get a clearance even though he was found not credible in court and pled guilty of making untruthful statements? I don't believe he can. I don't believe he can. I don't believe he should have been promoted 18 million times. I don't believe he should be in the position he's in. Maybe he could be an advisor in the background, but again, cops get sidelined. That was a reason you get sidelined, and that's it. You get sent out to pasture. Kaz should have been sent out to pasture right there. But again, that's the quality that Eric Adams looks for, because I've never heard the man say an honest thing. Not what he eats, not anything. So DOI does this investigation. Let's bring that investigation up real quick. Where is that? There we go. So this is DOI's conclusion into the investigation, right? So for 15 months, Tim Pearson, even though there were body cam footage, even though there were numerous testimonies from witnesses, eyewitnesses, members of the NYPD, there was security camera of the incident. There was a bootlicker who I think erased his video, but whatever, doesn't matter. Clear as day, Tim Pearson lied. Clear as day, should have been arrested. So for 15 months, all we get is tons of overtime and a report from DOI. So here's their conclusion. Based on witnesses interviewed, body camera footage, and other evidence reviewed by DOI, Pearson acted unprofessionally when he sought to enter a city-run migrant shelter without showing identification, initiated aggressive physical contact with 2 security personnel to enter and remain inside the shelter, abused his authority when he threatened shelter staff jobs, and after they demanded identification pursuant to city policy, and provided false statements to NYPD officers about the conduct of shelter staff in connection with the above referenced incident, the consistency of the witness statement supports the conclusion that Pearson unreasonably refused to show identification and subsequently pushed 2 individuals when they failed to yield to his authority. Pearson also mischaracterized his actions in his statements to the police, resulting in the arrest of Bell and Rosenthal. That, my friends, there are numerous charges there, but what they just spelled out there is a Class A misdemeanor. You gave information that led to a false report being filed. It's a Class A misdemeanor. God knows how he interviewed, so he probably also provided false statements during an official interview and probably perjured himself. There was probably under things of perjury. So my question is, what is it that DOI does? Why are we paying for this service? This looks like another CCRB to me. They go after people who are doing their jobs, good moral civil servants that go after their jobs, and they fire them. But when high-ranking elected officials or high-ranking officials' friends do something horrible, they just make a report, and that's it, and it falls by the wayside. And what happens to Tim Pearson here? He's allowed to break the law. He had 2 individuals arrested, probably terminated from their jobs. And what's happening? What's happening to Eric Adams for going to bat for him for over 15 months over this? And what is Eric Adams' involvement in this investigation not only with the DOI, but with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, because where the hell is Alvin Bragg? I specifically remember when you walk in that court, one standard of justice for all. One standard of justice for all. Not in New York City, not in America, not under Trump's DOJ either. There is not one standard of justice for all. There's one standard for us. There's another standard for elected officials and their friends. And this report, clear as day, has made that. I'm saying right now, Tim Pearson should have been arrested based upon this report. He should have been arrested 15 months ago. You didn't even need to make this report. This was a waste of taxpayer money right here, what we just listened to. Marlon, what do you think about the conclusion from DOI?
Yeah, I think we said that months ago. You know, it took them this long to conduct an investigation. I mean, this is, you know, I go back to what Kathy Hochul did, right? One of the things she did was she created a new special inspector general position to basically monitor the DOI as well. And, you know, I'm like, why do we need that? You know, there are multiple, this is a failure on multiple levels in New York City and New York State. You know, we have we have her office, we have the city's DAs, we have the state's attorney general, Letitia James. And where are all these people to do their job? You know, where are all these people? We're seeing it right here in this investigation. You take 15 months to come to a conclusion that any reasonable person came to months ago. Okay. I mean, this, you know, government has a way of obfuscating a lot of their actions and hiding their true intentions. And I'm wondering, like, what are the true intentions of Hochul here? You know, because we have multiple layers of oversight that are clearly being like not doing their job and not doing their job properly. And none of those are doing their job. So we need another layer here. You know, it's like, I don't understand what's going on. And like I said before, I think this entire state needs like a giant reset at this point.
Well, since we're talking about Tim Pearson, you know, the mastermind behind Crumbs, here's a comment from formerly known as Gang Coffee and Donuts. Shout out to you, brother. $9.99 says Tim Pearson held up a lot of good people's promotions. Tim Pearson is an unscrupulous character. Tim Pearson is not someone that Eric Adams should appoint to his administration. Tim Pearson has been completely shrouded by scandal. His entire administration under Eric Adams, Tim Pearson, anything that has been surrounded by Tim Pearson has been yielded by negative results. It's just been an appearance of impropriety. We have numerous sexual allegations. We have Tim Pearson rumored to ask where his crumbs are, meaning where is his money coming from, these private contracts. So it's interesting to me, right? John, you're absolutely right. That is a Class A misdemeanor. That spells out a Class A misdemeanor. And for probable cause, all you need for probable cause is reason to believe that someone committed a crime. There's a complete dichotomy between probable cause to make an arrest, and as far as what happens in the court, you're innocent until proven guilty. But based on that body cam footage, which could have been viewed within a few hours, probable cause should have been met immediately. And it's obvious to me that this is some type of ploy, because a Class A misdemeanor, the statute of limitations for a Class A misdemeanor is 2 years in New York State. So this case, take it 15 months. That eats up a lot of time. And to me, I'm sure they're trying to eat up the time when it comes to statute of limitations. This probable cause could have been immediately deciphered upon the incident. This is absolutely ridiculous, a complete failure. At this point, I don't even understand why we even have a Department of Investigations. Their investigations are drawn out, and they're just completely useless. We have a DOI report on the khaki pants unit for the NYPD that was completely useless. It was completely vague. It didn't lay out the information that was imperative to the case when it comes to the operations. It doesn't talk about vehicle pursuits, which is the most compounding issue when it comes to khaki pants. We have a DOI report reflecting the chief of department, John Schell, and now the deputy mayor, Kaz Daughtry, on their unprofessionalism, their reckless behavior, having pissing matches on social media. That report took about 9 months, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then we have this report about Tim Pearson. Again, to me, it looks like it's complete ploy. It looks like it's just nothing but deflection. It's a waste of taxpayer money. DOI is absolutely ineffective, completely useless, and we could do away with it.
Yeah, if I may, Eric, also, what happens to those cops now? You know, what happens to those cops? It's like we mentioned, we talked before about the khaki pants guys, and they're playing Dukes of Hazzard in the middle of Midtown, right? When Chell and Adams and all those guys are gone, you're still going to be facing the consequences of those of being a cowboy. And in this case, those cops are facing lawsuits now. You know, I hope for their sake that they crossed all T's and dotted all I's and speak up for themselves. You know, because it's not the city, it's not Pearson, it's not Adams. None of those guys are facing any consequences for this. They're running out the door, while you guys are going to be facing those legal fees.
Absolutely. So listen, this morning we got about 500 people on here. Thanks for joining us. It's Friday. We're just about going into an hour. We'll probably do another hour. We were just going over a little news before we talk about the quotas. Two more things real quick. Also hearing through the grapevine that longtime public information officer, Sergeant Carlos Nieves, also turned assistant commissioner Nieves, was recently forced out of the NYPD. He actually didn't retire on his own fruition. I was hearing that a demotion was coming to make way for somebody else. I don't know how true that is, but that's what we're being told, as well as we're being told that the standards and assessments unit, whatever the hell they're called, that's run by Inspector O'Hare, is just absolutely all out hammering people for White Sox, for absolutely, just going in and hammering commands at every roll call for ridiculous things. And I think, that's something we're going to get into when we talk about performance goals and NYPD quotas. Last thing before we get out of here, because Sal Greco had a great show with Serena Townsend. Serena Townsend, former chief of IAB for New York City Corrections. I forget her exactly title. It was like something with trials, commissioner of trials. But basically chief of IAB for the Department of Corrections. And then the Adams administration had forced her out. She gives her breakdown of what Eric Adams' lawyer was basically asking of the court. And the way she puts it, I think it angers me, because I'm like, you know what? She's so right. Again, she's a lawyer. She's looking at the legal argument of it. So that's why I love that Sal consistently have her on. I personally think Serena should join the Finest Unfiltered and have her own show, or team up with Sal. Let us know what you think about that. That's my opinion. But listen to her analysis. Listen to her legal analysis of what Alex Spiro was telling the court as to why the judge should agree that the charges should be dropped without prejudice. Listen to what she has to say.
Sal, when was the last time, right? You're a former police officer. I'm a former prosecutor of a decade. When was the last time we dismissed charges against a defendant because the charges were interfering with the defendant's ability to do his job, or because somebody made a public statement about the defendant before trial? First of all, Eric Adams was on the Luigi Mangione perp walk and making all sorts of statements about how he's guilty, and he thinks that that's okay. But when people do it about him, it's not okay. This is insane. So Sal, kudos to Danielle Sassoon. She did the right thing. And the other 7 prosecutors who, retired or resigned in protest, good for them for standing up for their morals. I know how it feels to be asked by the Eric Adams administration to do something illegal, to do something against the morals of a prosecutor or against the morals of an attorney, and to just say no and then get screwed over it. It's fine. You're going to be okay because you ended up doing the right thing. So that's how I felt about the whole thing.
What do you think? What do you guys think about what Serena had to say there? I thought she gave a very unique perspective on that.
I thought her breakdown was super impressive, was spot on. There's no doubt about it that we've never analyzed someone's allegations based on their convenience and based on how it's going to affect their life. The charges come as the charges arise. If there's probable cause to make an arrest, we never say, I mean, I've never happened to me in my police command, like, you know what? I'm not going to arrest this guy today with this illegal firearm, this person of interest, this perpetrator, this subject. He's got something to do today. He's got to go to work today. I mean, we pick people up right in the middle of their jobs. We pick people up wherever we can grab them. We pick them up and we take them to court. And in most cases, it is an inconvenience. We've arrested people that are on their way to pick up their kids. It happens. It's unfortunate. We pick up people that are in dire situations. So this, again, I think Serena's spot on. To actually say that this is an inconvenience, that Eric Adams can't run the city, he can't operate, he can't get his campaign going, is absolutely ridiculous. It's a complete deflection. I can't believe people are actually buying into it. So spot on to Serena. I think that her synopsis is fantastic. And again, I said the same thing. I posed it to her for Serena to come to the Finest Unfiltered. Absolutely. Her perspective is unique. It'd be great to have a woman also part of this podcast, especially Serena. She's very intelligent. Emotional intelligence is spot on. So she'd be a great additive to the team.
Yeah, she's absolutely right here. You know, this is an unprecedented politicization of the law. And, you know, as we said last week, a lot of what happened to Trump himself is this. To me, it seems like a lot of that is politicization of the law back then is what's happening now, but from a different angle, you know. But for those of you watching, you may not think this is related to like what we just talked about with Tim Pearson, but all of these things are related. If you look into, if you dig into the fine grain of it, right? Because in this case, Danielle Sassoon was being pushed. She's being pushed to do something that's unethical and might get her in trouble with the bar associations. Okay. And in Tim Pearson's case, we have cops who are pushed to make an illegal arrest. Okay. So there's a lesson in between all of this that you know, when you're given orders, you yourself need to look at those orders. And if you have any questions about it, you should ask those questions, because ultimately you should ask those questions and be guided by the law and what you know, because ultimately it's you that's going to face the consequences of that. And in this case, Danielle Sassoon wisely chose to follow the law and not have to face repercussions for doing something that's unethical and potentially illegal later on.
Dude, last topic before we get on this quotas. Hochul, right? She so Trump's Department of Transportation finds a way to deny congestion pricing. This was a tax that New York residents did not want. This was a tax, for those of you that remember, Kathy Hochul put on hold until after the election because she knew it would harm Democrats. And so she knew that it would harm their chances of winning the election. So she waited until after the election to install it. So it shows you how wildly unpopular congestion pricing was, regardless of which side of the aisle you were on. She knew it would harm the Democrats, meaning Democrats would continue to shift further to the right because they just feel like they're getting taxed. So, you know, Donald Trump now has his Department of Transportation stop congestion pricing. People cheer on. He definitely sends out a trolling message, long live the king, knowing that everyone's going to go nuts on the left. And sure enough, they did. But Kathy Hochul says the cameras are staying on. What do you guys think about that? And what does that show? Like, you know, what does that show for Kathy Hochul, that she's complaining about him saying he's a king, but isn't she kind of doing the same thing, saying, shut up, I'm keeping these cameras on, I don't care anything about what you guys think, I waited till after the election and now here it is. What do you think about that, Eric?
This goes back to everything we've been saying. What do we hear from Eric Adams? I tell my people to follow the law. Well, the same thing goes for Kathy Hochul. How about you follow the law also? And She's put New York State at odds with the federal government right now, and she's operating in the same manner that they claim that Trump is narcissistic, that Trump is going to be this stormtrooper, that Trump is a dictator. Well, if that's what you're saying, if that's how you're pointing and you're pointing blame to Trump, and that's what you're accusing him of, you're doing the same thing. And if anything, she's doing far worse. She's operating as a complete dictator in New York State at this point. She knows damn well she's an intelligent person. She's an idiot in the way she's operate the state. But she's an intelligent person, and she knows that Eric Adams should be removed. It's completely irresponsible that Eric Adams is not removed. This is a failure to the people of New York State. This is a failure of people of New York City, and she's operating like she's a total female dictator. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah. All right. So, what do you think? What do you think, Marlon?
Yeah, it's Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. You accuse your enemy of what you are actually doing. And Democrats are very, very good at it. They're like, I think somewhere in the political career of a Democrat, you have to read Saul Alinsky's book and internalize it. Because Letitia James, obviously with her with the financial problems that she has. As pointed out by Sam Antar, they've all been accusing Trump of things that they've really been doing.
All right, so let's move into this. All right, I think this is a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts. I think it shows a failure in leadership completely, and I think the NYPD's been lacking leadership for decades. Because New York State and New York City have been lacking leadership for decades. So quotas, right? Quotas are getting pushed down. There are people that are complaining that they're illegal. A law then comes out and they make quotas illegal. When we talk about quotas, the NYPD has quotas for everything. Arrests, summonses, CDs, negative performance. What do they call those? Negative crafts. There's a quota for everything in the NYPD. So I listened to Ron Lukash and Rob Lukash and Ron Lason's the executive perspective interview, and I was like, it like kind of sparked my brain, and I'm like, wow, that was a great conversation. I'd like to further that a little. So I think 100%. There are quotas in the NYPD. There's always been quotas in the NYPD. Chief Mike Marino, at one time, when they were talking about quotas in the NYPD, he actually testified. And I loved the testimony because he was brutally honest. He said, yeah, there are quotas in the NYPD. And I believe he said, what do you want us to do? Just have people drive around all day and waste gas? There has to be some type of performance goal, right? And so ultimately, I believe that performance goals and quotas are the same exact thing. I believe they're the same exact thing. Eric, I saw you and Ron going back and forth in a chat. I didn't look at the 500 messages that you guys sent, but I saw you say that as well. What do you think about that? Like, what are your thoughts before we start to get into that?
So there's no doubt in my mind that the NYPD has had quotas for years, and they still have quotas. Now, I think that on the surface, a quota and a performance goal is the same thing. It's a form of measurement. And it would be the same thing whether it's the NYPD, if you sold cars, you're in a production company. To me, on the surface, it's the same thing. How it's utilized in the intent, in the direction of that measurement, that metric, that standard, is where we have a dichotomy between performance goal and a quota. So I think the difference between a quota is it's kind of a more minutia and minute in a sense. Well, we have a direct number, something that's specific. For instance, you're working. It happened to me, being a brand new rookie in the police department. John, you were part of that environment also, working the 120 precinct. I never forget. They came into roll call, even the commanding officer. And it was actually one of the commanding officers I liked. But it was understood. While you're doing patrol, you're answering your calls, you're out there in a busy command, you will get one collar a month, which means you're making one arrest, 20 summonses, And out of those 20 summonses, which had to be moving summonses, which meant B summonses, 2 had to be red lights. You had to get 1 quality of life summons, which was a C summons, and 5 UF 250s. That means you have to stop 5 people based on reasonable suspicion within the month that you believe you suspect of committing a crime. So, in fact, there was a quota. Now, to me, the difference is the intent, directed, and the purpose. That's an exact number. But when we talk about performance goals, it's a broader spectrum, right? It's the development of the police officer. It's the development of the team. It's the intent of how it correlates to public safety. We say, hey, the goal, we could say, right, a quota, and we have to have some form of measurement so that we keep people on path working. There's no doubt about it. We could say, hey, you're working in PSA 7. This is a busy precinct. We have 30 some odd robberies a week in this precinct. And these are rhetorical numbers. I don't know what the numbers are at this point. Say, hey, well, it wouldn't make sense that working in a precinct where we have violence, a high propensity for violence, we have robberies, we have shootings, that if you're out there, that the average person would make about 5 arrests a month or 1 arrest a month, whatever the number is, doesn't matter. But it's the development of, hey, listen, are you out there making an impact? Are you arresting the right people? People that are part of a gang, people that have an impact on the crime that's going on, rather than if you just grab 5 people for shoplifting. So I think I think at the surface, quotas and performance goals are the same, but it's the inner linings of it. It's the directive and the intent of the leadership. It completely falls on the leadership. So there's no doubt in my mind, there are quotas. And to me, you can interchange it and saying there are performance goals, but it's how it's utilized and how it's directed by the leadership. With good leadership, you get a good product. You have a performance goal. Here's what we expect of our police officers: to have an impact on crime, to have an impact on their career, their ability to become police officers and to get better at it by analyzing the impact of the type of work that they're doing in comparison to lazy and incompetent supervisors that just give a specific number. Get me 10 arrests, get me one summons, or whatever the case in a specific area. It doesn't matter what it is. They're not looking at the development of the officer, their engagement, and how it makes an impact. So to me, it's the same. It's how it's utilized by the leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it's Ron that made he pointed out that this is a lot of this goes back to systematic inadequate leadership. And I think he's spot on, I think he's spot on. And I think I 100% agree with you, Eric, that it also goes back to, lazy supervisors, right? I hadn't thought about this for a while, but this is something that I think we have to keep our eyes on, because with the emergence of the Q teams and the introduction of the Q teams and Tish creating a new citywide chief of quality of life, that quotas are something that we have to we have to put attention on again, because it things move in cycles, as we see with this department. And I'm particularly concerned that we might see a return of the excesses of Kelly's era, which include, the numbers game. So, something to keep our eyes on as things goes on.
Well, I think we're already there. I think we're already at the return of a lot of the failures of Broken Window. We're not a return to the positives when we were doing Broken Windows. But yeah, I think a lot of it's putting dots on the map at this point. I think a lot of what we're seeing now is numbers for numbers. I think Chief Mike Kemper summed that up best when he said that over 90% of the people in the subways that are stopped aren't frisked, yet they're given summonses. So that shows they're stopping the wrong people, because if you're not feeling unsafe in a situation where you're stopping someone that committed a crime, that means there's a problem there. So, I get the department's definition of what a performance goal is, right? I get that, but it's so up to each individual that it's actually not a policy at all. And the policy is numbers for numbers. The policy is, I don't care, get it done. Whether they say that's the official policy or not, that is the official policy. I agree that it wasn't the official policy, like Ron said. That's not the NYPD's official policy. It's not their official policy. It's the secret official policy. The secret official policy is, we have a lot of guys that do want to drive around, waste gas, and put their uniform every day and get paid and bitch and moan and don't do anything. And how do we get them to work? We have to give them goals. Now, I could see, Rob Lukash gave a great scenario. I was on a fixed post standing there for 20 days. I had no activity for 20 days. Does that mean that Rob was a terrible cop those 20 days? Absolutely not. Rob did his job. He did what he's supposed to do. He did what he was assigned to do, right? Not everything is related to arrest and summonses in police. And we did a show with Edwin Raymond where we really honed in on that. And it's true. Does your activity make you a great cop or a bad cop? No. But when you go 5 years or when you go 23 years and you have 9 arrests and all 9 of them your sergeant gave you, it shows me that you're a shit cop. It shows me, and I'm talking about Eric Adams, by the way. It shows me that, in case you got to know, 9 arrests. Yeah, 9 arrests, a 23-year career. I'm pretty sure not one of those was a pickup arrest. They all stem probably from a radio run and his sergeant ordering him to take the arrest. That shows that you have no work ethic. So if you're out there on patrol, I mean, I worked in some pretty slow places and I found it hard to not lock somebody up every day. I was never a big summons guy. I just wasn't into it. I wrote a couple of C summonses. I wrote a couple of movers when I was a rookie. I had a sergeant very early on tell us, Nancy Sirigliano, she said, I'll never forget, it was like one of our first days in roll call. She said, if I see any of you guys writing parking summonses, I'll give you a traffic application. You signed up to be the police. If you want to write parking summonses, go work for a traffic agent.
I remember
go work for traffic. And I was like, you know what? She's right. So I wrote a couple of movers, but I really went in as a cop. I went in on arresting bad guys and chasing down crimes. So I never really had to deal with the numbers for numbers bull crap, except when it related to the stop, question, and frisk. I had told you guys the story a couple of times that I was in anti-crime. They wanted us to do 2250s. And nearly every month, I never came in with 2250s. But I would come in with 3, 4, sometimes 7 arrests for the month. And sometimes those arrests were tied to those UF 250s, and sometimes they weren't. And I always thought it was stupid. I was like, there's not 20 robberies, there are not 20 majors in this command in a month. How could I possibly observe 20 people that I think? So when I see something, I do it. So I think the only thing the department did at this point is now say, oh, we have a performance goal. Okay, it's a number. Now, I personally don't have a problem with realistic quotas. I don't have a problem with that at all, because I'm saying that you should be doing your job. You should be out there. If you're telling me that you couldn't find one guy with a warrant, one person that broke a law in a month period, and you were out on patrol every day, I think there's something wrong. Now, a quota to that, I think you should arrest this old lady for anything just because you don't have something for the month. No. But there has to be a way to objectively measure something. There has to be a way. There has to be a formula to objectively measure someone. And to me, as a sergeant, like when I was a sergeant and I had a guy who did not do anything, I was like, no problem. You're just getting whatever collar comes up that nobody wants. It's you. You're up. You're up tonight, just so you know. You're up. And you're always going to meet that goal, right? Whatever that goal or that quota is. So I think the department creating this ComStat term of performance goal and pretending it's not a quota is honestly, it's slap in the face in the intelligence of everybody that hears it. It's a quota. I mean, it's a quota clear as day. Now, are quotas illegal? Yes, they are. Should they be illegal? Yes. Nobody should be arrested or issued a summons or stopped for no reason other than to meet the quota. Does that mean that a cop should not be given a goal or a criteria to meet that's more than manageable to do? I don't think so. I mean, but it's the law. I didn't write it. They did.
So I believe that they should change the verbiage in this, right? Because again, as I said, this is complete semantics. Performance objectives or performance expectations or performance goals. You can paint to me, it's the same horse. You can paint any color you like. In comparison to quotas, to me, it's the same exact thing. But I think you could change the verbiage. It should be expectations versus mandatory. And that's what we're really talking about, right? Because a quota is something that's mandatory. And that's where I saw the inadequacy of the police department, unfortunately, not just this administration, but when I worked in the 120 precinct early on in my career, and I saw some supervisors had a mandatory number, and it happened to me specifically. And when you're a rookie working on patrol, there's plenty of times you're banging around in a car, you're working the sectors, and John, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The 120 precinct, it was always understaffed. You're working Adam, Boyd, Charlie, David, Ida. You're running 5 sectors, rolling around in a car, running call to call. And sometimes you're working so hard to shit can these jobs and not make an arrest to get to the next call, unless it's something that's of a quality nature, a robbery. But there's a lot of discretion utilized to keep that car running. And sometimes you're not in a car because of shootings and you're working a fixed post, which means you're not in an enforcement role and you're making observations on that post. And sometimes you're doing that the entire month, and maybe you're on vacation for a week, and then you have one day out on patrol. And it didn't matter, where the supervisors still had that mandatory number. 1 arrest, 20 summonses, 1 C summons. And what does that do to a police officer? The amount of stress. And that puts the police officer at odds with the community. Because I've seen police officers make mistakes because that one day they have on patrol, they're in an enforcement aspect. They're working like a maniac trying to get that number, put themselves at odds with the community, obviously getting community complaints, and obviously making mistakes because of that pressure, because of that number. Now, I think that's different from an expectation. An expectation, you could say, hey, you work in PSA 7, the 120 precinct, Lower East Side and housing. These are busy commands. We have robberies. We have numerous narcotics infractions. It's expected that as a police officer, if you're working every day, day in and day out, approximately 20 tours a month in an enforcement role, that you would probably encounter numerous situations where you can make an arrest. And it would not be obtuse. It would not be out of the ordinary to expect someone to make an arrest or 2 arrests, depending on how many radio calls, but the voluminous of the crime trends in that particular precinct. So, which kind of correlates to what we have now, the quota bill. But it comes down to, again, leadership, how it's utilized by that leadership. And I blame the commanding officers. It's the commanding officers in these precincts. If your sergeants and lieutenants are pushing for a specific number, that is your failure. That is your failure. You need to make sure that the nomenclature of your precinct is about what arrest are they making and how does that make an impact on the precinct, on the quality of life, on public safety for that particular precinct. So unfortunately, working in the police department is all about people. You could work in one command. We have great leadership and cops are going out there and they're making quality arrests. And when I say quality arrest, that doesn't mean the crime in itself. It's the impact that particular arrest has in that community. Or you could work in a precinct where you have failed leadership and they're giving you a specific number, putting a lot of pressure, and that puts the cops at odds with the community. This is a major problem. Shout out to Tom Joyce, Coffee and Donuts. Here we go, $20. He says, keep up the good work, FUP. I assume that's the finest unfiltered people. Dipping in and out of the live due to obligations, catching the full episode on Rewind. Great week and all. Same thing to you, brother. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What are your thoughts as far as what I'm saying, as far as expectations versus mandatory? Marlon, what do you think?
Yeah, quotas are one of the most insidious things that I had to deal with. Like when I got out the academy, I was in they put me in Brooklyn North Impact, and 3 months into it, all of my class, all of the other guys, the other rookies that were with me knew that we didn't like it. We didn't like it at all, because you'd be told, okay, you better come back in with 2 250s and per tour, and I mean it's absurd. There are times when you're not going to get anything. It's quiet night, and again, going back to what you say, I think a lot of it has to do with leadership, and the commanding officers. We need leaders who proactively look at what's happening. If you see guys riding constantly bringing in bikes on sidewalks, and you dig into the data and you see that, hey, look, it's a guy riding a bike on the sidewalk with his kids, because that's happened. I saw like rookies riding guys on sidewalk. He's riding his bike on the sidewalk with his kid, or grandma, and what does that how does that prevent crime? Back then we had robbery patterns with kids on bikes pulling up and jumping out and robbing you, but you see though that the quota pushes guys to do it pushes the cops who are lazy to find a low-hanging fruit, and that is a massive problem that creates it creates animosity in the communities towards cops. So we need proactive leadership, okay, to tell cops what we're looking for, and to tell cops, listen, it's not about the numbers, it's about correcting a condition that's existing, okay? And you need to target the conditions and not the numbers. And this unfortunately intersects with a lot of other issues that the police department has, and a lot that we've mentioned before, such as the competency crisis, okay, and attrition, and again what Ron Layson said, which is systematic inadequate leadership. And in order for us to have competent leaders, we have to correct these issues so that the young cops that we get, the qualified people that we get for this job, could grow into being great commanding officers and great chiefs and great leaders who set policy in one police plaza. So this is an issue that we have to keep eyes on, and it intersects with a lot of the deeper issues in the police department.
So Ron says a quota is an arbitrary number given to achieve within a certain time frame, numbers for numbers. Performance objectives are specific direction given to achieve a positive effect on a condition. It's a wordplay. I'm sorry. It's honestly, it's a word salad. It's a complete word salad because they both have the same objective, which is to get numbers. They both have the same exact objective. It's a word play on numbers to try to circumvent the law that we didn't create. We did not create that law. This is what makes guys and girls not want to work. When they hear this, when they hear about performance objective versus quotas, and they're like, oh yeah, it's a quota. When you have Chief Terrence Monahan going on a video, if any supervisors, if they push a number on you, let us know, and we're going to deal with that supervisor. And meanwhile, what's he doing at the meetings? Where's your numbers? What's going on? Same guy that was saying, how many touches you got on people? How many touches we got on this one? Right? Same guy. But we changed the terminology of it. We made it a word. I don't agree with it at all. I think what we need is clear, utter direction to what's happening. We're having a problem, whether it's burglaries, whether it's grand larcenies, whether it's shootings, whatever it is. These are the crimes that we're going to have a no tolerance towards. They will be must arrest, must summons, and this is what we'll do. We'll bring these people back to the house. These will be issued DATs to be debriefed. These will not be issued DATs, whatever that is. And that's it. And if you're not partaking in that core mission of policing, there will be supervisor-led enforcement activity given to you. And you will have a negative evaluation. Instead of telling your sergeants to be sergeants, and then when you get a bum who's on patrol, and that sergeant is a sergeant, and says this guy does not partake in the core mission of policing, this guy consistently needs to be reinstructed, even though he had 7 years on the job. He consistently needs to be instructed on not only on 911 jobs, but while we're at scenes of crimes, while we're at scenes of incidents, and you give them a low evaluation, and the ICO and the operations coordinator and the CO are like, I don't know, I don't know. Can't we just give this guy a 3.5? It's like, didn't you just tell me to be a sergeant? Didn't you just tell me to be a sergeant? And then you're like, why aren't the sergeants sergeants? Because the lieutenants aren't lieutenants, and the captains aren't captains, and the commanding officers aren't commanding officers, and the inspectors aren't inspectors, and the chiefs aren't chiefs, and the police commission is not the police commission. And that's what the hell happens because we don't give clear leadership instruction. We're giving a word salad, and we're telling the supervisors, do us a favor, just violate the law, but just say these words instead. And then try to articulate in the court of law how a performance objective is not a quote. Try to articulate that because there's no way you're going to be able to do it. The end goal is activity. The end goal is arrest numbers. The end goal is summons numbers. So to me, when I hear that, that is a complete word salad. It throws me off. And I'm like, why are we doing this? The minute Monahan did that video, I'm like, I will never tell anyone I will never, ever, ever tell anybody to do that ever. I will never tell anybody that you need to come in to arrest a month or one arrest at the end of the tour or a thing. I'm not doing it. It says it clear as day. The chief told me there's a law saying it. I'm not doing this word salad of performance objectives. I'm not. And also, I'm not going out and doing supervisor-led enforcement and showing people who they need to write for B summonses either. I'm just giving them bad evaluations. And that's what's going to happen. You don't want to be cops. You don't want to do your job. I'm going to be a supervisor. And that's what needs to happen. And that's not happening. Today, what's happening is COs are still getting crushed for numbers. And then the COs are crushing the lieutenants. And the lieutenants are crushing the sergeants. And the sergeants are crushing the cops. And it's the same exact thing that's been happening for 30 years. Supervision has not gotten better in the NYPD. It's gotten significantly worse.
There's no doubt about it, there's quotas or performance objectives, or however you want to call it. Again, I say it's the same, but it's on a case-by-case basis how it's utilized by the supervisor. But ultimately, in the end, it's still an expectation, and it's also mandatory. I had a sergeant that was working for me, one of my last crime sergeants. Super intelligent guy. He ended up leaving working, going to a precinct in Brooklyn South. So I don't want to mention his name, but he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Super intelligent guy. But we used to laugh all the time. We say this job keeps a record of everything. And once we had the body cameras, we were like, oh, what's next? You're going to go into ComStat, and they want to know how many activations you have. And you know what? Those questions started to come up. It's like, oh, it was 2 taps on the body camera. It's like, how many of these you got? And it started to happen, John. And I know at the end, you were in an administrative role. And Marlon, I'm not sure if you saw it yourself, but I remember working out there. And a lot of times I would go to meetings and they're like, well, how many activations do these guys have? So that number started to come around, and there started to be an expectation. There's a quota on everything on this job. I'll never forget.
Which is also illegal, by the way.
Which is illegal.
Which is also illegal because it's not just arrests and summonses. It's a quota, and
absolutely.
So that shit's illegal too.
I'll never forget. What's the guy's name? He always looks like he has a toupee on. Worked in housing. You know what I'm talking about? I got to remember his name. Anyway, it will come to me. But he was a high-ranking guy in housing. And they gave us, at the time, it was called Q-Tex. It was before we had the cell phones. It was a Q-Tech. You're supposed to be able to run warrants. The thing never worked. It was horrible. I was an anti-crime sergeant on the Lower East Side, and it was horrible. Somebody put Salerno. It wasn't Salerno. It was, I got to remember, one of the chiefs. But, yeah, horrible look. I had like a wig. The guy would never let go of the job. But he said we had to use the Q-Tech 20 times a month. It was mandatory to use this Q-Tech. The thing was terrible. I could never get service. I'm standing with a violent perpetrator in a stairwell in the Lower East Side. I can't get any service. I threw the thing in my locker. I said I'm not using it. And he gave me a CD because I didn't use it 20 times per month. There is a quota on everything on this job. There's a number for everything. No one can deny this right now. If you're working the NYPD and you're working overtime, And they tell you straight out. I remember in the 120 precinct, I had one small block, and they said, we need 5 250s, which at the time, which is now referred to as a stop report. So you needed 5 250s, and you needed, I think it was 2 C summonses, right? Which is quality life summonses on a 1 block radius. That was a number. First of all, most of the time when you're doing these overtime sessions, you're working with a sergeant who's not your actual sergeant. So there's no time to work on a performance goal or an objective to develop the police officer and have the impact between you and the community. It's a set number. That number is a quota. There's no doubt about it. The job has quotas, and they put numbers on everything. I think that's the biggest mistake where they got caught with their pants down, is having quotas when it comes to UF 250s, now known as stop reports. Yes, Chief Delatorre, was it Chief Delatorre? Yes, it was Chief Delatorre who gave me a CD for not using this horrible Q-Tech that they wanted done 20 times a month. I'm standing, it could care less. I'm standing with a violent perpetrator trying to get this thing working, looking like an idiot, trying to get service, to get a warrant check or try to get some information about this building. Horrible. And that was an actual quota. But there's no doubt about it. There are quotas on this job. That was the biggest mistake, is giving a quota on a case that is a Supreme Court case, People versus DeBoer. How could they tell you that you have to stop this many people that you suspect committed a crime at a particular time during a time frame? That's a quota. That's mandatory. That's violating the law.
Yeah, but Eric, that contract wouldn't have got filled if you didn't meet that quota. So, they were there was an objective there. There was a performance objective there. Somebody had to get that contract, right?
They had to get their crumbs.
Somebody had to get their crumbs, and you weren't doing what you needed to do. Yeah.
Delatorre, what a first of all, someone should have put a quota on getting that guy some stuff to grow his hair. He had this horrible toupee. He would never let go of the job. I don't know. Is the guy still on the job? I don't even know.
Yeah. He's a deputy commissioner.
Is he? Yeah. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah. In Tish's State of the Union, one of the things that really struck me was she mentioned that this new Q teams and the quality of life chief is going to be centralized. She specifically used the word centralized. Okay. And that is one of the problems that leads us to this numbers game of quotas, right? The problem is centralizing leadership from the top. Okay. And that's a problem because what that does is it pushes I personally believe it pushes commanders and leaders to defer decision making and really being a proactive leader to the top. Okay. And this is a problem because I think we have a generation of police leaders who grew up in that, who have this Comstat worldview. Okay. Now I say it's a worldview because they kind of look at everything in terms of the numbers, right? When I was in Intel in Leeds, we had something called Lead Stat. Yeah. Basically, it's a case review. Every month, the chief would come in and he would ask you about a certain case or a couple cases. And basically, you have to come up with answers like, where's this going? What do you have so far? What did you do so far? And now the problem is a lot of those questions that they would ask you are basically boxes. Did you check this box? Did you check that box? Did you check this box? Which goes back to numbers. Instead, I think it becomes a question of, did you check this box instead of did you actually solve the problem? Did you do productive work that contributes to solving a problem? And that's why I say it's a worldview, because here he is applying this Comstat view to like on a very micro level, and I think by continuously centralizing power in this department, rather than giving your commanders and unit leaders the autonomy to make decisions and to go in and basically look at what their guys are doing and to make and to kind of shift the strategy so that it solves the problem. rather than just checks a box. I think that hurts us. Centralization hurts us. Okay, and centralization merely it's that fire that leads to the blaze that is quotas and numbers and worldview.
Yeah. So and Ryan, I think you're missing what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is this, right? If I give we're having a robbery issue, right? We're having a robbery issue up on 8th Avenue. And I say, John, go up on 8th Avenue and you need to get me one summons. And that's a quota, right? That's a quota. So, but if I go up there and I say, John, we're having a robbery issue up on 8th Avenue, and I'm going to give you a performance goal. I want a performance goal that has a positive effect on that condition. And I come back and I'm like, yeah, sorry, boss. I went up there. It was snowing out. Nobody was out there. I was standing on the block all by myself. There were no cars. Nobody drove by. And I sat there from 8 o'clock at night to 2:30 in the morning, to about 3:30 in the morning. I took a meal at this point, and then at the end of the night, I went in. Now, I think in my head, there were no robberies. I completed my performance goal. Did I solve the condition? No. Did I get the guys that were doing the robbery? No. But that performance objective is going to be looked at as I failed. And that's why I'm saying it's still a quota, because at the end of the day, the objective for the department is not truly the mission of having that positive effect on that condition. The objective for the department is activity. And sometimes the activity is you just being there. And maybe that robbery crew did drive by that night, but they saw me and they're like, this guy's going to just keep going. That guy's going to stop us. That guy's going to bother us. Just keep going. Just keep going. We're not going to do anything tonight. It's snowing. Nobody's out there. Boom. So in that scenario, I put you up there to stop that condition that night. I put you up there to get no robberies that night. We got no robberies that night. You were successful. But the job doesn't look at it like that. And that's why I'm saying the performance objective or performance goal and the quota is the same exact thing, because they have the same ultimate outcome. Now, I get the quota gives you that arbitrary number and the performance objective doesn't, but they have the same goal, which is you need to come back with activity. When what I just laid out, if you're up there effectively doing your job, you don't get an attaboy for that sometimes, even though you did your job that night, regardless if there was a blizzard or not that night. Or, you know what? I stopped a few people and I didn't give them a summons because guess what? I thought they were doing something and it turned out they weren't. But people saw me up there that night being a cop, interacting with the community, interacting with the business, stopping cars, stopping people, and nothing happened that night. And so that's why I'm saying that it's a word salad. It's the same exact thing. They have the same exact goal, which is ultimately activity, and it's ultimately weak leadership, because we're not telling the troops what we need to do. You know, what we need to do is this. We need to do exactly what I said. That's what it is. We're addressing this scenario. In these cases, these people will be arrested. When someone commits this crime, there is no discretion, whether it's a summons, an arrest, a DAT, whatever it is. And we're there to identify who this robbery crew is. This is who we believe is doing it. These are the cars that are doing it. And what happens, and everybody knows it, these guys go out to roll call. It was like revolutionary what I used to do in roll call, because I was the FIO as a cop. So it's completely revolutionary what I would do is I would let everyone know who has warrants. I would let everybody know in my roll calls when I was a sergeant, these are the crimes we're taking. This is who we think it is. This is what we want you to do. And guys will come up to me like blown away. Oh, wow, we never heard it. Oh, thank you so much for telling us that. And I'm like, isn't this what we should all be doing? Shouldn't patrol be tuned in on everything? But at every level of the NYPD, everybody's tuned out. It's the squads on one mission, special operations is on their own mission, patrols on their other mission, the traffic guys are doing their own mission, and we're not all on the same mission of public safety. So we need ultimate buy-in from everyone. And when we get that, then we won't need these stupid performance goals, because people like to go to work and people care to go to work. People want to do their job. And that's just not what's happening now. So we need these quotas or performance objectives, like we say. And currently what I'm hearing is, that professional standard, the Office of Professional Standards Division, they have their own performance objectives on how many negative crafts they're going to give out, how many CDs they're going to give out. And that is also illegal, because what you're doing is you're harming good cops and you're giving people that don't deserve CDs or don't deserve negative crafts, one, so that you could go back and show your inspector, oh, look, I did my job tonight. Absolutely ridiculous.
So I used to say, and I still believe this, there's two types of people when it comes to a workforce. There's doers and there's thinkers. And some people are critical thinkers, and they could do that. They could work outside the box. They could put themselves on a post and not make an arrest and be extremely effective. They engage the public. They make certain observations. Maybe they write down some notes, something they saw that may be of interest to the detective squad, maybe an active case going on there, something that's tangible and fruitful. But for some people, they're just doers. They actually have to just make an arrest, write a summons, or do something to make an impact. So I'll say this. It's unfortunate, and I think some people don't want to hear this, but there are some people, and John, I wonder if you agree, or Marlon, same thing. There are some people that need a quota. They need a quota. They need some type of goal or expectation to justify their existence. And I'll give you an example. And I'm not going to give this police officer's name, but I don't even think that the police officer understood the gravity of this. So I'm looking at a report one day. I'm looking at the Cognos report. So for our active retired, you know what a Cognos report is, but anyone outside agency is basically a list that tells you how many arrests the police officers made in a 28-day period, summonses, how many stops they've been involved in. And what it does, it gives you a gauge to see what the peer numbers are, just to get an idea, right? We don't try to push any numbers, but get an idea what everyone's doing based on the crime trends of the command. And I saw one officer in particular who came up through the de Blasio era. In a 7-year span, with 7 years on the job, never wrote a stop, question, and frisk report. I know they call it a stop report now, or it was a UF 250, but in 7 years of policing in the NYPD, never did a stop report. I was shocked. So I said,
"What grade detective?"
Probably made detective. So I said to the cop, I said, wait a minute. There's only two things that are going on here. One, you never did any police work your entire career, which I'm looking at your record, kind of looks that way also. Or you've actually stopped people and you didn't do the report and document it. So which one is it? He said he's never actually stopped someone based on reasonable suspicion. So I said, wait a minute. You go out you work in PSA 7 in the South Bronx every day. You look at complaint reports. You've never identified a complaint report with a description of a perpetrator that fits the description of someone on your post. Or maybe you received a 911 call and there was a burglary and there was property at a location that mirrored the same property you saw in a complaint report. You stopped someone that had that type of property in their possession. You never had these encounters. And he said, no. So I said, what are you doing? And that's why I said, it doesn't matter where you work. There's people in the NYPD, and I'm sure it's other precincts throughout the other law enforcement agencies throughout the country. They drive around a precinct, but they don't actually work there. In 7 years, not one encounter that he stopped someone based on reasonable suspicion that he suspected someone committed crime to determine if they committed crime. He's only been operating on proper cause because someone called 911 and said, hey, that person robbed me. To me, that's not even a real cop. But unfortunately, there are different grades of police officers. That's why we have evaluations. We have some that are phenomenal, and we have some that are just okay, and that's the reality. And we have to, and that's going to be a baseline. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So it takes good leadership to actually identify these things, to have these conversations. But it's unfortunate that a person like that needs an actual quota, need to say, hey, listen, you need 3 of this, so that they have a goal in their head to work towards something. Because if they're not given a quota or an expectation, they won't do anything, and they won't be mindful of it. So even though it's illegal, it's unfortunate. Some people need it. Now, shout out to Ron Layson and Rob Lukash. I thought on Wednesday they did a phenomenal job. I thought their show was awesome. And in continuance to that, Ron and I had a conversation going back and forth and agreeing and disagreeing on a lot of stuff. And that's the beauty of these perspectives. But I had put out a comment to them, and Rob Lukash read it out. And I said, if you're a salesman, you're working for a car dealership, and you don't sell a car for a month, it happens. These things happen. 2 months, maybe you don't sell a car. But after 3 months, are you really a salesman? And I feel the same way about a cop. If you're working in the South Bronx in a busy precinct and you're an enforcement role and you don't make an arrest 1 month, okay, it can happen. Maybe you're on vacation. Maybe you're assigned to a different post, something that kind of took you away from the enforcement. 2 months, okay, but 3 months and you don't make an arrest in such a busy precinct, are you really a cop? So, unfortunately, quotas sometimes are necessary for certain people.
Well, I think this goes back to hiring guys who want to be cops, and hiring qualified, competent people. If you hire guys who actually wanted to be cops, I think you have to actually tell them not to write, or tell them to operate with more, to have a more measured response. And I think that's easier than telling a lazy guy that, okay, he has to go out and actually do his job. And that goes back to hiring qualified people, and a job we know has a problem even filling seats right now. So how are we ever going to get to the point where, we get guys who are go-getters? When I just got to the 7-7, right, I was put with some old timers, and the sergeant noticed that. She was like, Bethel, she pulled me in her office 1 month, and she was like, Bethel, you're not getting anything. It's like, she's like, Bethel, you basically your numbers are down. And I'm like, Sarge, you saw my record when I was in Impact. It's not that I don't want to get anything. You put me with old timers, a guy with like 19 years on, who operates differently from me, who, I was fresh out of the academy. I'm ready to go. So I told him, put me with a young guy, with my time on, who wants to be active too. And we're gonna go out there. And she did, and we were rocking and rolling. But my point is that you need guys who want to be cops, and if we can't find guys who want to be cops, you're gonna get lazy guys who just want to fill a seat and get that pension after 20 years and do the bare minimum. And eventually that guy's gonna be chief, and he's going to be chief with that knowledge of what he did as a cop. And this is where that CompStat worldview comes into play, where the numbers, for the sake of numbers, is the way we measure productivity and the way we measure, getting stuff done, as opposed to that guy who's been a go-getter his entire career. He's been an active cop. He knows what to look for, and therefore knows how to navigate and tell guys, hey, listen, we're trying to correct a condition rather than just target a number, So, this goes back to being able to find the right guys who want to be cops.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think it's a failure on the legislators, and I think what needs to be done is you need to properly be supervisors and properly document cops and explain to cops when they're not partaking in their job, when they're not effectively doing their job. Like, listen, you're going out there every month. You never see a bad guy. You never do anything. I get horrible calls about you when you're on 911 calls. Nobody wants to work with you. And start to put people on probation and start to get people terminated. And then when the elected officials say, what's going on? We're getting all of these performance-related complaints and all of this stuff. Be like, oh, well, you guys passed this law that said that cops could drive around You said that cops could drive around, put a uniform on, and this is a result. So what we're doing is we're ensuring that people that want to be cops take this job, that people don't just come on this job and wear a uniform, drive around and waste gas for 8 hours and wouldn't piss on you when you're on fire. And when we call 911 jobs, they're too busy drinking coffee and not doing anything to come. So ultimately, do I think it's a major failure, that law? I don't necessarily know. I don't think it's a failure. I think the department just hasn't adjusted, right? Because they were so used to doing it that they don't know anything, so they continuously go back to it. And Eric and Rob pushed back on what you were saying about the car salesman and the quotas. It's two different things, and I agree with Rob there, because you can't push a quota on arrest, on summons. It's not the same thing. This is, we're talking about taking away people's constitutional rights, pushing enforcement activity on them. It is a lazy, sloppy form of leadership. It is. Now, could everyone else is getting one, you're going to get one? And I give a supervisor a rest. It is what it is. It goes without being said. But ultimately, I agree. I agree totally with what Ron and Rob said. It ultimately comes down to a failure, a complete failure in leadership. And unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see the NYPD and NYPD leadership violate the law using the guise of performance goals.
I'm going to push back at you both because maybe I'm not explaining my analogy. The analogy is not an actual number. My point is that when you're working as a salesman, to call yourself a salesman, you're going to have a product. You're going to have a goal. And the goal is to actually sell cars. And the same thing for police work. If you're in an enforcement role, the goal is to do enforcement. That could be arrest, that could be summonses, that could be stopping people. Eventually, if you're working in a precinct that's busy, if you're working in a, for instance, when I talk about a salesman, I'm not giving a specific number, but if you're a salesman, to call yourself a salesman, you actually have to sell cars. And to call yourself a cop, you actually have to do police work. So that's my point. So if you're working in a busy precinct and in a 3 months or 3 month time span, well, let's say you want to extend it, we can say 5 months. If you don't make any arrests or write any summonses or have any police encounters, are you really a cop? Are you making that observation? Are you going out there and doing actual police work? So that's my point. I'm not putting a focus on the number. I understand what you say. When you guys talk about put focus on the number for that, I can understand what you're saying. My point is, are you actually engaging in police work? And police work can be measured by numerous aspects, right? It could be measured by arrest. It could be measured by summonses. It could be measured by stop reports. It could be measured how you engage people. It could be measured. Maybe you were working on a post and you took some great notes on vehicles that were involved. That's what I would do sometimes in my post and write down license plates. Some of those license plates might be persons of interest or perpetrators that have to do with your particular robbery pattern that's going on in that precinct. So that's what I mean by being a cop. And if you're out there as a salesman, are you contributing to selling cars? Do you get engaged? Do you make phone calls that get context? Do you, when people walk into a dealership, do you engage them? Do you get them to give their information? Do you get them to be enticed to buy that car? Are you actually doing that type of work? And if you're a police officer and you're avoiding doing actual police work, well, you're not a cop. You're finding other ways to engage the public without being a police officer. So that's kind of my analogy. I'm sure you guys will push back, but ultimately, I think we all agree. Ron, Rob, Marlon, John, myself, we all agree that the ultimate failure and the reason why quotas are a problem is because of the leadership and the intent, the purpose behind it. And the purpose behind it by giving a definitive number within a specific time frame, because that's what a quota is, giving a measurement within a time frame. That's what puts the conducive pressure on that police officer, which is why I gave that example. The police officer that works one day in the enforcement role for the month puts the immense amount of pressure to get a certain number. And it should not be evaluated that way. What did you do on that particular day to be a police officer? And John, you identified it. You worked a post. There was no robberies on that post. You didn't make a summons or an arrest, but that is police work. You made sure that there were no crimes that day. That was my goal. If I had a post that, you know what? There were plenty of times I had fixed posts, and I would tell the guys that were out there selling drugs, yesterday, this was your corner. Today, this is my corner. I don't care what you do. But today, nothing's going on. This is my corner. This is my business. I would always say, I would look at it when I get a post. This is my store. No one's breaking into my store today. No one's parking in front of my store where you can't get in. I'm going to operate the store. So there are different facets. But unfortunately, and as I said, there are some people that need a quota or an expectation because they would do absolutely nothing. And ultimately, it's the same thing. It's what's driven behind it. If a leader in the leadership says, "Hey, kid, this is what you need to do to actually engage the public," I don't think someone ever told this police officer in 7 years, "You should be looking at the complaint reports, look at the property that was stolen, look at the descriptions, look at the locations, try to identify different patterns." But leadership takes work. It's much easier to be an effective leader, to be inadequate, to be incompetent. We've all had those supervisors. I was a brand new rookie. Myself and all the other rookies, we looked at our evaluations. We all had the same write-up, the exact same thing. The only difference was our signatures. We all had the same write-up because that's laziness and incompetence. An actual quota with no intent or purpose behind it for the broader spectrum is just a number. And it's laziness and incompetence. So I think we all agree.
You know, I see where you're coming from, Eric, but you know, I'm just gonna say that it's, you know, you get guys who want to be cops, and it's a whole lot easier. You have to tell them there's less things you have to tell them because they want to be there, they want to go out there, they want to do their job. I don't think you'll ever have to tell a guy who wants to be a cop that he needs to go out there and, you know, get these performance objectives. You'll never have to tell them that. Tell them the condition, tell them where the condition's at, and those guys are going to go out there. Okay. And, yeah, so, but I think that a lot of these issues are kind of generational too, because, you know, I've seen like the Gen Z guys they're kind of different, you know, but there are still guys who are hungry for their generation, and there's still guys on the job now who want to be cops and who want to be active, and there's less that you have to tell them in terms of this, and we just need to get back to the NYPD brand that attracts these kind of guys, you know, because I'm willing to bet you that when given the options, those guys aren't coming here anymore. You know, they see how you're being treated here as an active cop, and they see how other jurisdictions are now offering them bonuses just to come here. So why would they come to New York? You know, this is why we have to improve the brand. Improve the brand, get the best candidates. Now you have to deal with less of these issues because these guys want to be here and they want to go out there and do these things.
Yeah. So VSS Ventura, shout out to him. He says quotas are a money-making racket to generate profits, much like a corporation. The only performance objective there should be are show up to work and bring your lunch pail to work. Policing isn't a business. Let Wall Street make the money and let the police keep crime in check. Stop complicating the matter and feeling there's a need for justification to exist. I honestly agree with everything you got to say right there, because and I don't think we're saying the same thing, Eric. Like I agree with you. It's a failure in leadership, but there are so you got the guys that there's plenty of ways to be lazy, right? I could meet my performance objective or my quota very early on and be done. Let's take, for example, the traffic guy. I got to get 10 summonses a day. That guy looks like a superstar, right? He gets his 10 summonses a day. He gets his one collar a day. But what does he really do? He goes out, he writes 10 summonses in this generated money-making scheme, and he goes sleep the rest of the day. And then he gets his one collar a month, and he goes and sleeps the rest of the day. Is that guy really a great cop? And now you got Rob Lukash, who's on a post for 20 days out of his 23 days on patrol. And it's not, I really think, and I'm guilty of it too. I think that the quota system has infected all of our brains. So I ran into a couple of cops recently. They had stopped, and I was in Florida, and they had stopped. They'd seen the car. We started talking, and they were NYPD guys that switched out here. So I'm talking like, how is it? I love it. It's great. I love it. I'm like, well, what do you love about it? What is it? You know, I'm like, you guys go out? They're like, no, it's not like the NYPD. We're not as close because we're kind of separated. We work as individuals, but we stick together on the tour. We don't really go in for roll call. We go in once a week. We meet somewhere. And then I'm like, well, what do they ask for you? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what do they ask you to do? Like, how many summonses? How many arrests? They're like, no, there's nothing like that here. There's absolutely nothing like that here. And yet, the job gets done and people are doing everything. And I'm like, and when he said that to me, I'm like, how do you get lazy people to work? In my head, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, how do you get lazy people to work? But then when you think it like the way I'm thinking about it, you know, just because you're working, does that mean you're not lazy? You know what I mean? It's like there's so many different, and I think honestly, I think policing has been the quota system has infected our minds of what's a good cop and what's a bad cop. And then the quota system and the way we treat cops, because we treat Rob Lukash like he's a piece of garbage and he's not a good cop when he was out for his whole tour, helping people all day, but he didn't really have those performance objectives met that the guy that really slept the whole week did. And that guy's a great cop and Rob's a terrible cop, when really I think Rob's the good cop and that guy's a terrible cop, you know? And so that's what like I think we're all saying.
No, I agree with you. In a sense, let me explain. I'll tell you a scenario I had. So unfortunately, most of the time, not all commands, but a lot of times cops that put in for anti-crime, when we did have anti-crime, it was already understood that the cops were pretty much selected already. But I didn't do that. I actually went and had legitimate interviews. And I actually invited the commanding officer to be involved in them. I would sit down. It was me as a special operations lieutenant, the sergeant, and the commanding officer. And we would actually have interviews. We would actually have the cops submit 49s, which is a form basically in a small resume type. And I would actually do the work. And I would pull up their history, their arrests, and all kinds of stuff. And sometimes you get cops that have so many arrests, right? But you don't get a chance to really look at the context behind them. If you made 100 shoplifting arrests, so what? Even if you made 100 robbery arrests, and that happens to be all these arrests are given to you. But I had this one particular cop, I'll never forget, was kind of quirky. He's still working at PSA 7, awesome guy, was involved in a shooting. Turned out to be one of the best cops. He was kind of quirky. People didn't know him. They were shocked that I was considering him for anti-crime. So we came in to do an interview, and I'll never forget, we were laughing our heads off. He came in, his uniform was squared away, and he even put his hat on. He saluted us, stood at attention. We were laughing because most of the guys were a lot less informal. And his arrests were nothing like out of the ordinary. He was doing his job. It wasn't super impressive. But when we started to talk to this cop, he was working Sector Admin PSA 7. He knew every complaint report. He knew what buildings they correlated with. He even told me, he was, well, I called the detective on this case. I called the detective asking about this. He knew property that was stolen. He knew cars that were stolen. He knew about open cases that other cops wrote 61s in. He knew, which are complaint reports. He knew so much about his sector. And it's exactly what Rob Lukash said. It wasn't just arrest. He was making arrest, but he was making arrest. He was involved with the community. He knew what was going on. I was like, these are the cops you want. So sure enough, I put him on my crime team. Turned out to be fantastic. And everybody was shocked. And they were giving me shit. And they were making fun of me. And if anybody knows me, I don't care. If you make fun of me, you can't. Because I'll make fun of myself. I don't care. I'll laugh about it. And he turned out to be an awesome cop. And he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so does everybody else. Phenomenal. So you know what? It's not just arrest. It's the whole ball of wax. You have to look at every aspect. And unfortunately, I think also as good leaders, we have to understand that people are not going to be, they're not going to have their strengths in every category. Some people will be, amazing at engaging the public and writing summonses. Some people will be amazing with arrest. Some people will be amazing at talking to people. And you have to find their strengths and weaknesses and build someone and build them up. But it takes leadership and it takes work. So that's my synopsis, though. Sometimes that's my message out there to anyone that's in a leadership position. Don't sleep on anybody. Have interviews, talk to people. You never know what you're going to get. You might get surprised. People will surprise you.
Absolutely. So listen, I just Marlon, before you go, want to welcome to the stage our good friend, and you people may know him, Edwin Raymond. Edwin's been tuning into the conversation. Edwin, we were talking about NYPD quotas versus performance goals. We don't
What's
really
up,
need to
brother?
introduce you. Everybody knows who you are. The author of An Inconvenient Cop. Is also a playwright now. And he took time to come down and sit with the little people and tell us how he feels about about NYPD quotas versus performance goals. Edwin's also now working at John Jay University, was also a professor as well. Edwin, thanks for coming on the show. What are your thoughts about what you're listening to, what you're hearing?
Definitely. First, thanks for. It's been a while since we've spoken. I know we say we're gonna do another one. So thanks. I feel a little insulted that you will have this conversation without me, though, guys. I have to say.
Well, you're big time now, bro. We didn't want to. We didn't want to.
We've been looking for you. You've been MIA.
No, I've been here, man. So I think, John, one of the points that I wanted to make, I think you literally just started making it, like the idea that, this type of policing kind of took over the mindset of what the very definition of being a cop is. I heard Marlon several times, as well as Eric. And again, you mean well when you say it, but you almost don't hear yourself. Like, this is like the analogy with, being a salesman. This is a tax-funded public good. We're not moving products here. We're not selling a service. This is a tax-funded public good. At least that's what it's supposed to be. And the minute you start putting corporate America metrics into something that's supposed to be a service, you're going to have issues. Now, I'll start by saying my fight, NYPD 12, it was never for the purpose of cops doing nothing. I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings about, NYPD 12, that we were never advocating for cops to do nothing. And I do see many cops that are able to hide behind the work, the sacrifices that we made and do absolutely nothing. I don't support that. That's terrible. You understand? There is a job to do, but the job in itself is not solely arresting people all day and night. That is not, we cannot oversimplify what a police officer's duties are to just that. And I love the example you give with the brothers in Florida, because sometimes you're so engulfed with this mentality, because it's how we were raised here in New York. You forget that there are other parts of the nation that don't operate that way, and they're not any less cops. You understand? They run towards the gunfire just as we do. And Eric, that salesman analogy, like, just apply it to the FDNY, right? So if you're not putting out fires every now and then, are you still a firefighter? I think you are. I think you're still trained. I think when the time comes, you'll do what you have to do. Again, the cops that completely hide behind the fight of the NYPD 12 and other progressive movements to do nothing, I don't like it. I'll tell you, when the documentary essentially forced the chief of department, Terrence Monahan, to put out that internal intranet video saying there are no quotas, anyone caught using quotas. At the time, I was a sergeant and in housing in PSA 2, and I'll never forget. Like, a couple of days after that, the trustees came in and did roll call, and it was like, if I were you guys, I wouldn't do shit. They fucked themselves with that one. They should have never put that video out. You don't have to do shit anymore. And I'm like, why is that the message that you want to give the cops? You understand? The trustees were saying this. So, and these are guys that did their time, right? They're 30 plus years on, beer bellies. They did their time. But imagine them coming from a time where, again, the very definition of a cop was getting those numbers. Even they felt that they would have leaned into this laziness, if you want to call it that. So that was never what the fight was about. It was about not pushing cops. As you said, I've watched cops get their activity out the way early, and the end of the month, they don't care what's happening. They blinders on, right? When it's time to show, when you compare the cops, he got his activity. All they see is those numbers, right? So he's the good cop, but yet the cop, not to use the cop that's actually visible on patrol, malleable, knows what hat to wear. If it doesn't, it better produce those numbers at the end of the month, because if it doesn't, you're not seen, et cetera. And, this is why we have that issue. I don't think quotas are necessary, but we do have to find a way to motivate officers to take pride in their jobs. But that doesn't mean solely arresting people. We cannot use those metrics as the very definition of what a good cop is. And the minute the leadership has the vision and the courage to do things different, to push back against status quo, I think we will get better police departments. But we have to have that epiphany, if you will. And I think that's kind of what happened to you, John, in Florida, speaking to those guys. And Eric, listen, after I did deep research, I ran into a lot of people that knows you. They everyone says you're a good guy, etc. I do think you kind of really got sucked into the whole cowboy thing, but it happens. Every industry has their thing, right? And in our industry, specifically in New York and other similar cities, it's the gun collar. It's they're to the point where some cops, they don't even feel like you're a real cop if you're not doing that stuff. They see the uniform as, social workers, etc. The real job is this. And, I implore you, just look beyond that. Like, there's so much more to what it means to be a police officer. When the time comes, though, like a Swiss Army knife, you have to know what tools to use, but we can't keep using the same tool. And the definition of a good cop is not simply someone who gets guns all day, especially when they start violating the Constitution to do so. Sorry for that long rant. Just had a lot to say.
No, so Edward, I think you made a lot of inferences here. I'm glad you came on the podcast, by the way. So I always talk about Supreme Court cases. I don't believe in violating rights to get illegal firearms. Absolutely not. I would absolutely teach my cops more than anybody. These guys were so avid in their facets, and their understandability of Supreme Court cases was unmatched and unparalleled. So, and if you listen to what I'm saying, I did not give a number on arrest. But what I'm saying is you should engage the public. And if you work in the South Bronx and you're in an enforcement role and you're out in the street for 3 months, it's pretty much impossible that you're not going to see something that equates to an arrest. And what I'm saying, what's the intent and the purpose behind that? So what's the purpose of making an arrest? That's why I said the arrest should have an impact on public safety, the development of that police officer in the community. So if you're making an arrest just to make an arrest because you need a number, that's a complete flaw. But that's a flaw in the leadership. The leadership should identify that. When I give that case about that police officer that in 7 years never stopped someone for reasonable suspicion, that's a failure in the leadership. Now, I can tell you this. I'm in California. I've been all over the world, all over the country in retirement, and I see things happen every day. People make infractions. I see it. Unfortunately, you don't lose that cop eye. But what I can tell you is what's the impact? What's the purpose? And the purpose of making arrest on my behalf and running special operations was to gather intelligence and gather information to solve crimes. Sometimes you make arrest of a legal firearm of a perpetrator who has vital information that may solve other crimes. So that's really, I think, the purpose behind making arrest is to stop crime. Now, again, that's the beauty of discretion. I've had plenty of people that have committed infractions, committed crimes, even narcotics, and let them go because that is better impact for that person, better impact for the police officer, and a better impact for the community. I appreciate you saying about the cowboy mentality. I think I went out there completely professional. I think I'm glad that you got a good assessment, but we went out there working the South Bronx, keeping these guys safe. I could sleep at night. I think we did a phenomenal job. There's no one that understands Supreme Court case better than myself and my teams. We studied it day in and day out. And ultimately, it's not about a number. I never said, hey, you should have 5 of this. But I find it hard to believe working, not driving, working in the South Bronx or anywhere in New York City for 3 months in an enforcement role that you don't find an arrest, because that arrest will find you. If you have that eye and you say, listen, I'm working in the South Bronx. We have old ladies getting robbed. And what I used to do is I would follow the potential victims, and I would follow old ladies, and I would find suspects that would try to rob those old ladies. And my point is it's pretty tough to work an enforcement role, working as a cop, not just driving around and not being involved in an arrest situation or something that is of vital importance. Maybe you, as I said, you saw an important license plate that you documented and you transmit that information to the detective squad. Maybe you had a great conversation with someone that had some vital importance, some information. That's all part of an arrest. That's all part of enforcement. That's why I say it's the whole ball of wax. That one police officer I told you about, they put anti-crime. His arrest record wasn't phenomenal, but he knew his community. He knew the precinct. He knew the ins and outs. He was communicating with the detectives, that's a fantastic police officer. And to me, that's a cop. But by the way,
I mean,
thank you for coming on here, Edwin. I appreciate
of
it.
course. So good
I
point.
love having you here.
Yeah, no, definitely. Good point. I think one thing I'll expand on is it's not just the South Bronx. Anywhere, citywide, 3 months, you will come across probable cause. You have to remember, prior to legalization in 2021, the number one reason that people came into cuffs was marijuana, right? And to this day, the number one reason that people get summonses is open container. These are not things that happen exclusively where we have more violent crime, which is why I'm not a fan of broken windows. These are things that happen everywhere, arguably at higher rates in areas that don't have violent crimes, because you don't feel, because there's no quotas there. You understand? If you really want to get open container, walk through Park Slope. But there can be an argument as to whether or not that should be allowed, et cetera. Technically, the law is the law. So I agree with you, but I'll just expand on that. It's not just South Bronx or where violent crimes are occurring. In 3 months, as a police officer, you're gonna come across probable cause, and if you don't, then you're refusing to take any type of action. Now, here's my argument, which I spoke to you guys, 18 months ago. I believe there should be an official warning system that allows you to use discretion, documented discretion. That way, the argument of are you even engaging, et cetera, because I believe because right now everything is on body cam, and some officers might be afraid to use discretion because of that, especially if they're not trained or told that they can still use discretion. If we encourage discretion, now are some going to abuse it? They're going to be like, well, look, I gave 50 warnings, leave me alone. Unfortunately, that's kind of what I've learned, the nature of a lot of people that do this job. But if we can find a way to document discretion, encourage discretion, as long as it's something minor, I think you will have officers more willing to engage the public. Because I remember when I first became a supervisor in housing, I would tell my guys, yo, just go clear that up. It'd be a dice game. Technically, we have probable cause. It'd be a dice game in the middle of the courtyard of the projects. And when I come back 2 hours later, they didn't clear it up. And they were afraid to even approach folks because they only know to approach folks when it's time to take enforcement action. I said, no, even if you don't arrest or summons, there's a way. And then, I would have to kind of demonstrate, and we would clear up the courtyard. The thing is, I don't know if this stuff is cookie cutter. I don't know if you can train someone to be that way. Maybe you can, but there's a window period where if you don't do it, you lose them, because the type of cop someone is, I think that forms in the first 3 years of their career, of what they value, what they see as important, what they think their jobs are, et cetera, what the repetitive task is. And again, we need an evolution in the industry to move it forward, because inevitably, you see how it can get. Obviously, with a pandemic 5 years ago, the distractions were suppressed, and we saw unprecedented, protests in the streets. That was a tough time. A lot of people, as an industry, we haven't recovered from 5 years ago, right? This is what, between, and I know, you guys, specifically John, got started with the vaccine situation, but between that in New York and just the way that people just didn't want to do the job anymore, many of them moved to other places that they felt they'd be embraced more. If the industry remains stubborn, particularly the leadership remains stubborn and status quo, we're not going to evolve the industry. And I mean, listen, inevitably it's going to get terrible again. It's a cycle. It's cyclical, and we can avoid that if we get the right leadership, right mindset. We need to allow our minds to grow, though. And again, I want to say, because a lot of friends still on the job, they're like, listen, Ed, what happened to you was messed up, but you made it very easy for these cops to do nothing. And I was like, that was never my goal. That was never my goal.
So I just want to expand on one thing, because you said something and it really just sparked something in my head. So Marlon, can we get your thoughts on this? So Edwin said firefighters, we don't put that same goal on them, right? Pat Donahue pushes back. He says that firefighters are reactionary, police officers are proactive. So it just gets me thinking now, right? And like most of the issues that we see surrounding quotas, it forms from patrol precincts or housing or transit, right? That's the majority of the job. 99 commands in total, 77 precincts, couple of transit district, couple of housing, 99 commands. This is the majority of the problems. Now we have enforcement related commands, right? When you're on patrol, and today patrol's short staffed, but today they're running from job to job, yet they're being asked to do checkpoints. They're being asked to come in with numbers. Now, I believe when you're on patrol, you're like Edwin said, it's impossible. You're going to go to 911 jobs. It's a must arrest situation. Should we just let patrol cops be patrol cops? Because technically, while you're on patrol, you actually are reactionary. What do you think about what Edwin had to say? Do you agree that just because a firefighter didn't fight a fire, he's not a fireman? Do you agree that just because you didn't make an arrest, you're not a cop? Like, what do you think about that statement? Because honestly, it got me thinking, and I gotta be honest, I think I agree with you, Edwin. I think that's exactly what it is. Like, what do you think about that, Marlon?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Edwin said. You know, I brought up a lot of great points, you know. But I think that the main problem is with we can't just let patrol be patrol. We can't. Because the problem is that you know, good patrol cops, it's my belief that good patrol cops grow into good crime cops, grow into being good detectives, go into, you know, and good leadership later on. Because you learn the basic skills on patrol. You know, you learn how to diffuse situations, how to talk to people, how to, you know, get that eye, you know, and to get that experience that you're going to need to go later on. You know, I one of the things I kind of guarded against in my career was I never wanted to be put in a unit where I got there and I was unprepared for it. You know, I believed in like progression, you know. And I believe that progression gave me the knowledge that I need to take into the next unit and be a good cop in that next unit. So I think we can't just let patrol be patrol. I think, and this goes back to the issue that we need good, competent cops, and we need enough of them so that patrol gets the time to actually learn the job rather than to go from job to job to job to job, and then to get on to the next portion of their career without that experience. You know, without having developed these skills early on in their career. So I think, though, that, you know, Eric touched on it a couple go-rounds ago, that about the metrics for evaluating a good cop. And I think perhaps those metrics need to change. And I think Edwin actually touched on it as well. You know, we need a new metric to properly evaluate what's a good cop. And I think perhaps, I don't know what mechanism we'd use for it, but I think perhaps that part of that is basically asking the cop about his sector, you know, what's going on in your sector, you know, making sure that cop has full knowledge of the conditions in his sector, what's going on in his sector, the people in his sector, because the cop the cop who has that knowledge and who's a complete cop is going to take that knowledge into crime or whatever violence suppression unit he goes to, and he's going to know who to target in the community, who to hunt, who the bad guys, you know. Yeah. And that is how we get rid of the animosity that communities have for us when we go after the wrong people, you know. So that's just what I'm thinking right now.
Marlon, just to add, the irony is when you look at the old evaluation system, of the, I think it's 27 different categories, none of them have anything to do with enforcement. That's the irony. I mean, it's a de facto way that we're truly evaluated. But when you, and that was my argument when they gave me the low evals to try to justify not promoting me. I said, none of this has to do with, and here's to be clear, my activity wasn't even the lowest. It was just the fact that I had the audacity to say something about how the system operated. That's what really pissed them off. It was the mentality, because when you actually looked at the numbers, I wasn't the lowest guy in the squad, but I did question what we would do. What are we even doing out here? And that just, as you can imagine, that they weren't happy about that. But arrest summonses, stop and frisk, those are not even things that are technically on the evaluation categories that are used to determine the efficiency of an officer. And in the new system, obviously that stuff is still missing. But in reality, those are the things that are truly valued. Why? Because it's what's incentivized. It's what the top value. So I think one thing all of us agree with here for sure is that the leadership is just not adequate. The leadership has to incentivize the cultural shift, and that's what's not happening. Today they have compliance stat. I believe the only stat that's not recorded. Right? We know why, and I think they just want to shake that federal monitor. The federal monitor is, listen, man, from Bloomberg to De Blasio and now Adams, from Kelly to Bratton to O'Neill to Shea to Sewell to Caban to, I can't remember the other gentleman's name, and now Tish. That monitor isn't going anywhere because they keep finding these deficiencies. And I think at this point, the department is ready. The department's leadership is ready to get that monitor going. And now you're starting to see a shift, with the exception of certain units. You're starting to see a big shift in how things are done and what commanders are accountable for. Because, the Holy Grail gun collar is not as attractive right now because compliance stat is starting to push back on that. I think they're tired of failing whatever the monitor is looking for.
Raymond, I gotta. I'm sorry, Edwin. I appreciate you coming on. I gotta push back on what you said by cowboy mentality, because there's two aspects to looking at cowboy mentality, right? Cowboy could be resilient, could be someone that's tough, but it also could be a negative annotation, which I think you're referring to as being reckless. And anyone who ever worked with me, for me, or worked above me can tell you I was extremely professional. My cops were extremely professional. We went out there aggressive, assertive, with control. And you mentioned the South Bronx. The reason why I mentioned South Bronx is because I spent almost a decade there.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you this: any command that I was assigned to or would be assigned to, I would find that element that is causing an impact, because there is an element in any command. John worked in the 123. There's an element in the 123 that affects the quality of life there. There's an element in the 100, any command, and there's an element in the South Bronx. And that was my world. And that's what I'm trying to say. We talk about arrest. My world was very specific and now related to special operations and getting illegal firearms to stop shootings in a particular precinct in the South Bronx. So my world was not dealing with the nice old ladies, not dealing with the nice people. It was when I volunteered my time to play basketball with the kids. I also ran a program with the Explorer program, volunteering, helping these kids out. But my world at work was a small world. And I find it hard to believe that a 3-month period, if you're working in that small element and you're looking for those targeted perpetrators that are creating an imbalance in that community, it's hard that in 3 months you would not see something that equates to an arrest that is valuable and invaluable information that can lead to other forms of intelligence to stop crime in that community. That was my world. I always say my world working in the South Bronx was very small. The nice people, I didn't get to see them. They go to work, they're home, they're out having dinner. I didn't get to deal with those people. I deal with that small. It was precision policing. As Rob Lucas says here, precision policing. It was a small percentage. That was my world. And the world was to be aggressive with control. And if that means being a cowboy, I'll own it. But there is a difference, and I think what you're saying is being out of control. At no point was myself or my units out of control. We were dealing with a high propensity for violence, and we had. I let you speak. Let me speak for a second. We had to get home safe, and that's the most important. While getting these illegal firearms off the street. But with that being said, I find it hard to believe driving and working in the South Bronx in enforcement role, and I do see patrol as enforcement role. Being anti-crime, I would get a lot of my information from the patrol guys. What are you seeing out there? What do you hear? Those guys are it's unfortunate. That's why I say to John all the time, we want to get a patrol cop on here because those guys have a lot of valuable information. We need to speak to those patrol guys, but it should be intrusive. Police work should be intrusive. We should be talking to all people, even if you're not in enforcement role. If you're just directing traffic, you should talk to people. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Because the community wants to see you. They want to speak to you at all different levels. So, Edwin, I appreciate it. Thank you, brother. Go ahead.
Definitely. So I'll define cowboy, essentially just not necessarily reckless, but action chasing. Like, again, like I've seen guys in housing as a supervisor. One of the things we have to do is inspect the Viper. For those who are not aware, there are certain housing facilities that have live CCTV and officers that have to watch. The thing is, the officers that are watching those videos are usually, they're limited, restricted, or sometimes at the end of their careers because they are waiting They're literally waiting to be fired or forced to resign. And I'll tell you, some guys can't turn it off. As a desk officer, as a sergeant, there was one guy, he kept calling the desk because he was panning, zooming, and tilting, and them cameras looking for any and everything in those hallways. And some might say, well, that's good, he's getting this. And there was one situation where I was glad that someone was watching those cameras, and we caught something, a terrible felony in one of the roof landings. But, you know, he was a crime guy who did something unconstitutional and eventually got fired. And he still, like, they're about to fire you for this. And he cannot turn it off. That's what I mean by cowboy. It's just action chasing. Again, they believe they're doing what's right because the goal of getting those guns has become so important. The ends essentially justify the means. But unfortunately, there's laws, there's rules, and they're willing to ignore those laws and rules, the Constitution, etc. Because in their way, like, even if it's unconstitutional and gets tossed, there's literally a saying to make them sleep at night. At least we got the gun off the street. Like, that's all rationalization for unconstitutional policing. Yeah, we got the gun off the street, but there's exclusionary rule for a reason. Let's do things within parameters of the Fourth Amendment, etc. Listen, if it's really about guns on the street, one of the things that always puzzles me are the Second Amendment enthusiasts, right? So, because the guns that are illegal in New York City start off very legal in Tallahassee and Virginia. But you don't support legislation, you meaning not you, anyone here, just in general, you wouldn't support federal legislation that stops those guns from starting legal so easily. But the minute it gets trafficked up the I-95 in Brooklyn, we want to arrest them one by one. It's ridiculous. Like, do you know how many guns are out there? Like, when the mayor says 10,000 guns in 4 years, that's because there's so many more out there. This is a ridiculous, it's like trying to mop the beach. It's not going to happen. Okay, we can create a dam to stop the water, or we can mop the beach a bucket at a time. That's what we're doing. And the fact that so many good people who are malleable and impressionable become law enforcement, and they get told to mop the beach, and they think they're doing the right thing. That's somewhat of another argument. But if you're truly about getting guns off the street, you technically, intuitively, should support legislation that suppresses how easy it is for that gun to start in the first place. Because let's be honest, after the Supreme Court ruling in 2022, it completely undermines the way the NYPD operates. Because technically, before the burden, the argument was, in legalese, the argument was, it was a precious argument, although I know in a city like New York why it's problematic. The argument is, the Second Amendment simply says you're allowed to bear arms. So this notion that you have to prove to the police department why you should have arms is unconstitutional. If the police department feels you shouldn't, it's their burden. As with anything else in the Bill of Rights, it's the burden of the government to prove why to prove its case. Technically, any and everyone who doesn't have a felony could carry legally right now, right? We can literally the floodgates could be open for second, and New York City is not ready for that. You understand? And I'm kind of going off in a tangent, but again, defining cowboy, just action chasing to the point where they're not focusing on legality anymore. And I'm not saying that's what you did specifically, but the truly looking in the mirror and feeling like I'm that cop for mopping the beach. It's like we have to shift. I believe we have to shift away from that. Not saying that getting illegal guns, especially illegal guns in the hands of recidivists and people who are trying or have already done terrible things with those firearms. I'm not saying that that's not something that we should be focusing on. But the way, again, coming from the hood, seeing guns everywhere, I was really shocked at 22 years old when I realized this was the thing. Because to the public, that's just another day on the job. Like when it's that 380, right? And like 13 cops behind it on the deck. Like in cop world, those Twitter pictures look good. To the outside, well, I've tested this with friends who are civilians. I said, check this out. And they're like, okay, what's this? Again, they have no idea. But in our industry, that's a big deal. Every industry has its thing. That's a big deal in our industry. It looks silly to the public. That one gun and 13 people standing there proud. It's crazy. And this is what's defined a lot of the issues in the department, what tries to justify a lot of the unconstitutional policing that we see.
So, I mean, listen, I think the two-way argument is something that we should have on another day. It's completely off the topic. Just real quick on it, though, I'm just going to say, if you don't commit any crimes in this country, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to own a firearm. Where I live now, 70% of the people that I drive past on the road have a firearm in their car. I live in a very safe neighborhood. There's literally no crime here. And guns are everywhere. They're literally everywhere. And I'm right next to the largest city in America by landmass. And yes, per capita, they have a higher per capita violent crime rate than you would say in New York. But the amount of crimes is actually so little compared to New York. It's not even funny, even though the landmass is huge. So there's that whole argument on the two-way. But I think more importantly, let's get back to the quotas. And let's just go for another couple of minutes because I got to run. We're about 2 hours and 35 minutes. But I personally, because I think you brought up a great point, I do not think that patrol cops are proactive police work. Now, and what I'm saying is I don't think that these performance goals or these quotas, because I think that they're the same thing. And Edwin, I do want you to answer that question at some point. Are performance goals the same thing as quotas? I believe they are. But I don't think a patrol cop is, I think what we do wrong is we take a patrol cop and we say, in order for you to be a great patrol cop, you have to mirror what an anti-crime cop does while answering your 911 calls, while sitting on hospitalized prisoners, while sitting on EDPs, while sitting on crime scenes, while transporting prisoners. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair. And I think that's a lot of the pressure that happens. And that's a lot of the reason people leave the NYPD is there's so much pressure when you're first on this job and you're in a patrol command and you're answering these 911 jobs and you're doing all these details and you're doing a million different things. And yet I'm comparing you to a guy that literally has the whole month to go around and look for summonses and arrests. And it's not a fair analysis of a cop. And so I don't believe, I kind of agree. I think what I heard from Edwin and thinking about what Pat Donahue's pushed back and thinking about what you guys said, I personally believe that, yeah, I think that is the biggest failure. And that is the issue where we're seeing the need for these performance goals and these quotas. Because guess what? That guy or girl that still wants to go into that enforcement unit, they're still going to push higher. They're going to go higher, right? And now if we're focusing on the work that we should focus on, when you went to that domestic incident, you didn't properly document it. You didn't do this. This was a must arrest. You should have did that. Now I think that's a true metric of, are you a good cop or a bad cop? I think what we're determining based upon that isn't good, you know. So, Marlon, what do we got? Let's go around one more time and then let's get final thoughts.
Well, you know, a lot of this is also the city wanting to do more with less, you know. So we judge patrol cops in terms of like conditions cops or crime cops, you know, in terms of units that are strictly proactive enforcement that don't have to respond to radio runs. And I think it's the whole do more with less. And if we, you know, this city has 8 million people. The fact that we only have like 20,000 police officers and say maybe another 4,000, 5,000 detectives. So that means we have 25,000 actual cops. I mean, I'm excluding the supervisors, right? We actually have 25,000 cops for a city of 8 million people. That's not adequate, you know? If we had enough cops, an adequate amount of cops to patrol the city, then we could apportion, you know, patrol to be the job of patrol and these other violence suppression units to do their job, you know? And I think a lot of this becomes easier. Instead, we don't have enough cops and we have different forces pushing down on the police department, trying to get two different things accomplished. You know, you have on the bottom, you have progressive politicians on one side, and the other side, you have the business community who wants who, if you talk to a lot of these wealthy business owners who own very expensive properties in Manhattan, they want you to lock up everybody, even people for things that you don't have probable cause for. They want you to lock them up anyway, right?
He blocked my driveway.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously.
Exactly. He said something stupid to me online. Go talk to him and arrest him. It doesn't work like that, So you have these forces pushing down on the police department, and the police department is trying to navigate in between, and find ways. And I think this is where you get that worldview, So I think that we're not going to agree on everything here, but I think the baseline issue here that we're going around is the fact that there are systematic problems within the NYPD, and one of those is we don't have enough cops. You need more manpower on the job so that guys on patrol can have the time to become well-rounded cops. Okay, and once they become well-rounded cops, we need to change the metric of what we judge them as a cop, and that will carry on for the rest of their career. So when he's a chief, we're not going to have to. The chief won't have like 10 arrests and now his mentality to push down to the rest of the cops is we need numbers to judge how you're a good cop, So that's where I'm at on this.
I love it, Edward. Thank you so much for coming on. I say it all the time. Opposition meets opportunity. I think a lot of the stuff that we say is actually pretty similar. We have some minute differences, but I think ultimately it's similar. I think we all want the same thing. We all want public safety. We all want to work under the U.S. Constitution. We all want our rights respected. We all want to be treated well. I grew up in the hood too. You talked about the hood, and you told me many times. I grew up in the hood also. I grew up in a black neighborhood. I lived in Stapleton. Grew up in Stapleton as a kid. So I saw aggressive police work. It was necessary. Aggressive control. But there is a difference. There's a difference between aggressive control and out of control. It's definitely different. Again, like I said, I appreciate you coming on here. I don't know what the echo is, so I'm going to pass over to you until it goes away.
Yeah, gentlemen, I think we all got echoes.
Oh man, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know what's going on. You press something?
Nah, I don't even hear you guys echoing at all. So that's the weird thing.
For some reason audio issues all day.
What about Marlon? You hear it?
Yeah, I hear a little bit of it. From Eric, I heard it. You're coming in clear right now.
How about now? It sounded like it went away.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so let me go. But again, I say opposition meets opportunity. Edwin, I really appreciate you coming on here. We're going to see some differences, some similarities, and hopefully we can come to an agreement. I think we all agree about what Marlon just said. There's systematic problems in the police department. I talk about systematic racism, the systematic issues which stems from the 50s about urban development and housing in the suburbs. I think a lot of that has an impact on neighborhoods in New York City. But when we talk about quotas and performance goals, I do believe they are the same thing. It's the intent behind it, the purpose. I think the purpose of arrest should be to garner and gather information and intelligence to solve crimes, which is why when we have a propensity for violence or we have a robbery pattern going on, we need to make a lot of arrests to gather information, not necessarily to put people in jail, but to get information. I tell you right now, through arrest, I've gotten so much valuable information that has solved lives. And to me, that was a success, depending on what the impact was. I can tell you right now, I've used a lot of discretion in my career. I've even let people go with firearms. I can say it now in retirement because we're looking for someone that has the intent to use that firearm illegally to hurt someone. I believe in the Second Amendment. I do. I believe in that. And you're right. Someone that has to commit a crime. But unfortunately, most of the persons of interest or subjects I encountered when they were in possession of a legal firearm, they've already had shootings behind them, numerous robberies. They were predicate felons. These were people that had not unwilled intentions with those firearms. So if you're doing your job properly, you have good leadership, you don't need a performance expectation, and you don't need a quota. And quotas should not be necessary. But unfortunately, we do have laziness, we do have incompetence, and it stems to the rank and file and the leadership. Ultimately, the most important element of an organization is effective leadership. And if we have effective leadership, it will definitely minimize. I don't think it'll ever get rid of it. It's just something impossible to have, zero tolerance, but to minimize it as much as possible is by putting emphasis on the leadership. Those are my thoughts. Edwin, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. You're welcome here anytime, brother.
Definitely, brother. I think you and Marlon said it. One of the most important things, Marlon, you already said it. We need well-rounded officers. You have to be malleable. You have to know when to be the callous enforcer, when to be the social worker, when to be the mentor, etc. I think those make the best cops. And I agree with you, Eric. Intelligence is important. We through debriefings, etc. We do get a lot of intelligence with arrests. But the NCO program, I noticed the NCOs when they were really good at their jobs, they got a lot of intel also without having to get that arrest first. Many in the housing, many shootings we solved because NCOs, the person trusted the NCO, and sometimes even community affairs. Again, not saying that. Again, my argument was never that we don't enforce at all. But if because you do value intelligence, you see the importance of intelligence. There's so many ways to get that intelligence, and that rapport goes far. That rapport, you understand? That's pretty much it. Listen, any conversation with Quotas, please give me a heads up. I'll jump on and.
Can you do me a favor? One favor? Did you ever read the book Gang Leader for a Day?
No, you never recommended that. I'll write it right now.
You get a chance. It's an amazing book. It talks about housing and gathering intelligence and information. It's about, so there was a young man, he was actually going to the University of Chicago, and I think you would love this book.
I'm looking it up right now.
He has to do a thesis, and the question is, what's it like to be black in America? So he goes to housing in Chicago, and he goes to it with a clipboard and some stupid questions. And the guy's like, he goes to a hallway in housing. He's asking the guy, he's like, hey, what's it like to be black in America? He's like, give me that stupid clipboard. And he's like, hang around with us. Yeah, amazing book.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever get a chance, amazing book. But the stuff that's happened there that was in the 90s is the same thing that's happening right now. And I know what you're saying about the NCO program. It's great. But he talks about in the book, a lot of people don't get information because in housing, they have their own economy, they have their own community, and they have to protect themselves by not giving out some information. And a lot of stuff that's handled in housing is handled, they have almost like their own court system. He talks about their own community. So it's an amazing book. So a lot of times they're not going to give that information to the police, unfortunately, only by arrest. Now, I agree. The NCO program, I thought, had a lot of drawbacks. There are some positives. There were some cops in there that were phenomenal to gather information. But a lot of those cops that were great at getting information, they did intrusive police work. They came from anti-crime and they transitioned to this. So, but with that being said, hopefully with that program, that type of policing could be implemented and have a balance, and be centered. So I appreciate it.
So, and Edwin, last thing before we get out of here, quotas and performance goals, are they the same in your opinion?
Yeah, man, synonymous.
So, all right. So I think we summed it up. What we're saying, there's still quotas. Quotas still exist in the NYPD. It stems from poor leadership, not good ideas. We're talking about programs, NCO program, this program. Every 3 months, every 4 months, we have different programs, right? But yet we always expect the same things from everybody, whether it's the patrol cop, it's the NCO cop, it's the anti-crime cop, it's the public safety cop, it's the CRT cop, it's the SRG cop. Whatever, you're in the community affairs cop, we always expect the same thing, that you're an anti-crime cop and you have that mentality. And I think we need to change that. And I agree a lot with that. So with that being said, went a little longer. We had a special surprise guest. Edwin.
I got one question, if you mind.
Sure.
Just one. One question for Edwin before you go, Edwin, because I heard you talk about at the time we had you on the podcast about the idea of a warning system. I see some good things and bad things. But the only thing I'm not surprised. Well, I'm surprised you're not saying is if you implemented that in today's NYPD, don't you think they would put a quota on those warnings also?
Unfortunately, that's the thing we see with stats. Once there's a stat, it gets that same pressure. So again, it does have, unfortunately, it does have the ability to be manipulated and abused. But I think it would at least get, because again, because I have to admit, when Bratton first said this, so Bratton said to someone who supports me in private that he doesn't like the quotas, but they have to exist because if we didn't have them, cops would drive to the quietest block and do nothing all day. I didn't want to believe that. I thought it was insulting to officers, but yeah, I've heard some stories and seen some things myself. 18 months, nothing at all. And again, before the NYPD 12, that wouldn't have been possible. Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm trying to think, how do we get cops engaged again? But not in the way that it's the end all be all, but just so they're at least out there addressing conditions, even if it doesn't end in a summons or arrest, at least engaging. They're not even willing to engage, from what I understand and what I've seen.
If I may, they've already added numbers to that. Now, what you're talking about, like the West Coast, I believe, have something called a deferred action report. But with the changes to the level 1 contact with people on the street, I think they're already moving to quantify that, with the body cameras. So already happening.
Yeah, it's just more of the same. So listen, 12:05. Check out the Sal Greco show. I believe he had Sam Antar is going to be on there. Sam Antar from White Collar Fraud, former Crazy Eddie CFO. So, and they're breaking down what's going on with Letitia James. So that'd be a good episode. I'm going to check it out. Make sure you go over there. Definitely check out Edwin's book, An Inconvenient Cop. Oh, you can get that on Amazon. I actually bought it and I listened to the audiobook. I like the audiobook a lot. I always do that. Of any book that I get, if there is an audiobook, I'll get it. But I thought that Edwin did a great job of when he actually labeled out the situations that he was involved in and the pressure from quotas, not only from his perspective, but from the people that he worked around. And I really got to feel like I got to know Edwin Raymond, and I got to see the world through his eyes. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Definitely check it out. New York Times bestseller, and deservingly so. So congrats to you. Thanks for coming on, Marlon. Thanks as always for joining us. Eric, thanks always for joining us. Guys, we'll be back at you 12:05, and then if not, we'll be back on Monday 8:05. Right? So, all right, guys. See you soon.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901-BLUE. That's 888-901-BLUE.